I don't think we don't use the term yeah, so it has some legal ramifications. And so I already changed his, I'll say we partner with you. Unless you've been promised something different that I'm unaware of. Like we signed on, I mean, is that right?
So far, it's meaning with
Yeah. Cosign, yeah. Until something performed, yeah, they're very specific. Really? I would think it's more, it seems like the regulatory lines is deeper. Yes, philosophical.
He just wrote me said he's going to get some things.
I like holding it. I think there's lavalier.
Yes.
Very happy.
Yes.
Excited. That language is awkward.
Because I think a lot of people still like
the slide.
that's my assumption.
Cosine the partner. But it doesn't have to change for this slide.
Yeah. So TV cameras. Something else was thinking.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't worry. We got other things. Yeah, don't worry.
Oh, no, maybe not media.
No, it's not that. We just like to,
Reads like an impressive thing.
It does, yeah. The key is in naming good titles, good naming.
The power of each one. Yeah. Yeah, with the intention that you refute. Yeah, no, that's to reach better. And I think many people start. At least I'm really
Cover scripture, God, science, statistics, all in one paragraph.
Excellencies, distinguished scholars, and esteemed guests, first of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you to the Acton Institute for the organization of this beautiful occasion of sharing of thought. I am Davide Mambriani, and I am presently serve as Cultural Affairs Officers for the Dicastery for the Evangelization at the Jubilee 2025. I'm very happy to be here today to deliver remarks on behalf also to the Archbishop Rino Fisichella, which is a pro-prefect of our dicastery, and the section for the fundamental question of the evangelizations in the world. It's a great joy to be here with you all at this Pontifical Gregorian University for this important conference organized by the Acton Institute on a very, very important theme, which is the artificial intelligence and the human dignity and the free society. We are gathered in the heart of Rome, in the Jubilee of Hope, to reflect on a question that lies as the intersection of human creativity, moral responsibility, and spiritual renewal. This Jubilee invites the entire Church to rediscover what it means to be sons and daughters, and it has been an intense spiritual journey and a truly special occasion, and a coming together of people from across cultures, languages, reinforcing the universality of the Church. The Holy Father, the first one from the United States, has reminded us that hope does not require having all the answers, but rather putting trust in God and following Christ, especially during difficult times. The work confronts the disruptive force of new technologies. This holy year asks something more profound than technical guidelines or temporary safeguards. It asks that we purify our gaze so that the human person remains seen and treated as a subject and never as an object, a creator, not a product, a moral agent, and never a data point. We are all guided by the perennial wisdom of the Church. When technological or economic power is unmoored from moral truth, society becomes vulnerable to coercion, exploitation, and the reduction of man to an instrument. The Church, therefore, insists that the human person must never be subordinated to the machine, nor human freedom constrained by system design without reference to the moral law. Fear is not a Christian response to innovation. God creates man with intelligence and freedom precisely so that we may cultivate the word, develop new tools, and bring forth new expressions of the good. But authentic creativity requires responsibility. The moral imagination, the ability to see beyond utility to meaning, is what distinguishes human ingenuity from the mere efficiency. If AI reflects only our technical capacity but not our moral clarity, we will create tools that dwarf us. If instead it reflects the truth about the human person, it can become an instrument of solidarity, discovery, and authentic human flourishing. In the past October, the Acton Institute held a conference at the Jubilee Church of San Salvatore in Lauro, which confronted some of the pressing questions on application of the social doctrine of the Church, aptly titled "The Social Doctrine of the Church in the Age of Uncertainty." In this Jubilee year, the Church has called us to restore what has been lost, repair what has been damaged, and recenter what has drifted toward the periphery. The Holy Year, therefore, gives us an opportunity for a moral recalibration. My personal hope is that the work of this conference will help illuminate a path forward where innovation is guided by wisdom, where freedom is anchored in truth, and where human dignity remains the compass by which all technological development is measured. The Holy Father has placed this as a preeminent topic of this pontificate. And today we are joined by professors, theologians, and representatives from tech and the world of business and entrepreneurship. The Acton Institute has been at the very center of this debate, and it's my hope that we can renew our confidence that authentic progress, whether spiritual or technological, is possible only when the human person is recognized as protagonist, never the product of the history. May the Lord bless your discussion and grant the insight formed here may help the Church and the world navigate this new frontier with courage, humility, and steadfast protection of human dignity. I want to say sorry for my bad English, and thank you for your patience. Grazie mille, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Davide, for your support personally of this AI conference and for bringing us that message from Archbishop Fisichella. All of us at Acton are thrilled to be recognized as an official part of the Church's celebration of the Jubilee of Hope. Good afternoon also, everyone. I'm Scott Landry, and I serve as the Executive Director of Istituto Acton, which is the Rome office for the Acton Institute. On behalf of our entire team, it's my joy to also welcome you to this important discussion. First, I'd like to offer our gratitude to 4 partners who have made today's conference possible. The Liberty Fund, the John Templeton Foundation, and the Templeton Religion Trust have generously and financially supported today's events. And Father Mark Lewis, the rector here at the Pontifical Gregorian University, has allowed us to host this discussion in this beautiful aula, and the whole team at the Gregorian has been amazing to work with. So thank you to each and all of them. So for those who are new to Acton events, what is Acton Institute? The Acton Institute's mission is succinct: to promote a free and virtuous society characterized by individual liberty and sustained by religious principles. In short, Acton stands at the intersection of religion and economics. Our distinctive and integrative approach offers a Judeo-Christian moral and anthropological argument for the free society, which highlights the free market as a necessary part, a necessary ingredient of the free society. We connect good intentions to sound economics by integrating a Christian anthropology with those truths knowable through reason and those uncovered by economics. By clarifying these foundations of freedom, Acton promotes a distinct vision of the free and virtuous society and explains the benefits of individual liberty guided by religious principles. So why today's conference on artificial intelligence? As you know, Pope Leo XIV signaled by his choice of name and his early remarks as our Holy Father that he thinks we're living in a historic moment of social, cultural, and economic upheaval, which will be driven by rapid advances in technology, including AI. Because the important discussions on AI will examine economic good, technological progress, what it truly means to be a human person, and other aspects of Catholic social teaching. This issue is one that is very much at the core of what we're about at Acton Institute. So today's conference is a first step, major step to convene leaders here in Rome who can add to this conversation. So as a bridge builder, we at Acton approach today's discussion from 2 lenses. First, from the perspective of those leading in the building of AI tools, what is important that they'd like us all to know to ensure that the building of AI is done well and that we can advocate for what we all need to advocate for. So that's why our first of 2 sessions this afternoon is entitled Building the Tools of AI. And the second lens is more broad. Question is, what is it about artificial intelligence that touches on enduring questions and important principles? So that's why the second half of the conference will be titled Artificial Intelligence Matters Ancient and New. I'm so excited to hear from our 6 excellent speakers this afternoon, and then to allow all of you to ask them questions in 2 panel discussions. So let's get going. Our first session focuses on 3 presentations about building the tools of artificial intelligence from 3 successful builders and evaluators of AI technology. Carl Wirth is CEO of Nimbalist, a company with technology which allows workers to manage teams of AI agents. Previously, he built a company called Evergage, which leveraged machine learning to personal websites, mobile apps, and email to allow companies to market more effectively. Evergage a few years ago was acquired by Salesforce and became the fastest growing acquisition in Salesforce history. Carl has served also in many leadership and advisory roles in other leading technology firms. Carl's talk is entitled AI and the Changing Nature of Work. Please join me in welcoming Carl Wirth.
Thank you. I'm glad to be talking with you today. And as Scott shared, I'll be sharing from my perspective leading my latest company, where for the past year, I've been working 10 hours a day or more with teams of agents and talking with many people who are trying to do the same. So in some sense, I have a little bit of glimpse to the future because I think we'll all be working with teams of AI agents, and I just want to talk to you from that perspective and how work has changed and will change. So I'm going to give you 5 different observations about that changing nature of work. And the first one is that AI is a catalyst that provides the activation energy, if you remember your chemistry for a chemical reaction, the activation energy that's needed for you to learn new things and do higher quality of work. Things you wanted to learn anyway, higher quality of work you wanted to do anyway, but you never had enough energy to do it, and now with AI, you can. And so here's an example of learning new things. This is a classic diagram that you do in chemistry class for that. You have the reactants, you want to get to the products, but it takes energy to get there, and you don't have enough. There's this hump to get over. And one example from my own life is I used to code, but it's been about 20, 25 years since I've coded. And whenever I thought about getting back into coding, the activation energy was just too high. I had to learn all sorts of details, and I would try it, and I couldn't get the environment right. But now with AI, I'm coding again because I have a tutor that's stepping me along at every step of the way. And you could say, oh no, I thought what would happen would be AI would just do everything for you. And of course, it can code for me, but I'm finding myself learning to code because I have a tutor that's stepping me along. That's one example. It also helps you to do higher quality work. So same diagram here. Now I'm thinking about a company. I'm thinking about my own company. I work with a group of very talented, excellent individuals. We want to do the right thing, but like all people, we're kind of lazy, and it's hard to do the right thing. Some examples of that. This is coding language, but we want to do test-driven development. It's the right way to work. You write a test, then you write your code, and then you check to make sure that your code matches the test, and then you iterate. That's, of course, how you should do it, but it's boring to write tests, and so you don't. You just code, and then you kind of hope it works, and that's the way even large software companies end up working. It's just too hard to do the tests. We are now, all of us, doing test-driven development completely. Why? Because the AI writes the test for us, and it keeps the test up to date as we work. Very similar story with documentation. The right way to write code, and I think to do many things in work, is you should document what you intend to do. You write it down. Then you actually go and do it. As you do it, you keep your document of what you're going to do matching with what you did. And at the end, you should have one artifact that describes everything very well. Nobody does that because we're lazy. That's a lot of work. I just want to go do the thing. I don't want to keep the documentation up to date. We have perfect documentation now because as we work, the AI is keeping the documentation up to date with us. So that means we are actually doing much higher quality work than we've ever done together with AI. So some positives there. I just got timed out here. Yeah, and so a few other examples of that just quickly. Doing more research. Before I do anything, I'm able to do much more research than I used to because I can just ask Claude to go and do it, and it does research. I check my work. I look at the copy of whatever I'm writing and make sure it's better. I keep things at a consistent standard. We're able to just with one / command, say, hey, AI, whenever I write a blog post, whenever I do this or that, check it against these 10 things, and it does and checks it. So the consistency and standard is raised up for me, but also for everyone on my team and for everyone. And lastly, I'm able to experiment a lot more. It's quicker to try things, so I can try and fail 5 times, and by that, refine my idea better. So it is possible, and we hear a lot about the concern that AI is going to come and take a lot of jobs, and I am worried about that. But on the positive side, I see AI up-leveling each person, all of humanity, if they wish, in terms of their skills and the quality of their work. So it's strange that I would talk about the better quality of work when there's so much AI slop out there. I don't know if that word translates for those, but slop is like junk, just AI, just garbage that it's throwing out all over the place. And we see that on social media or whatever we're reading. And this gets me to my second point, which is that I've been watching AI increase the gap between the motivated and the lazy. And again, I do worry about AI increasing the gap between the strong and the weak, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it definitely increases the gap between the motivated and the lazy. And if the weak or the poor are motivated, this may offer some hope. So of course there's a temptation to be lazy with AI. There are many people who are willing to sell their birthright for a bowl of porridge. So just, I want to get this essay done. Hey, AI, write this talk for me. I don't feel like writing it. And I could just do that and sell my birthright. But what I am seeing is that the motivated and the curious actually get their skills and their growth rate increased. It's a lot the last point that I just made. If you're motivated, you can up-level with AI. But what happens with the lazy or the fatalistic, and I think that's a big worry because we're being told over and over again that, oh, AI is just going to take over our jobs, it's going to be way smarter than you ever. So I talk to my kids and other people, why should I even try? And if you get into that cycle, this is what happens for you, is that you actually have AI write the whole talk, in this case, or do my homework for me, and then I learn nothing. And so I may be upskilled a little bit, but I'm actually learning less over time. So there's going to be this bifurcation of people who are upskilling and people who are de-skilling exactly at the same time by AI. And in the long run, what really matters is the growth rate, right? Even if it's a linear growth rate, if I'm on a higher slope, I'm going to pass the person who's on a lower growth rate. And if it's compounding, which I think it is with AI, a compounding growth rate, then all that matters is growth. Personal growth, growth of your own skills and abilities. So all that matters, in a sense, is your motivation and willingness to get in the game. And so I think that's really important. That said, the smart, the able, the ones with resources, if they're motivated, do get multiplied. So I work with a 10x engineer. He's now a 50x engineer. He's simultaneously coding in 6 languages. No one can touch him. How would you compete against that? That is a challenge. Same with a marketer, same with a business person. You do get multiplied. That's what technology does, is it multiplies. And so what happens? Does this mean that power just accrues to the few? Do the strong get stronger? How do you compete with that? And I think that's certainly a possibility, although my hope is that this fact of motivation being what most matters, in the end, what I'm saying is character is what matters most, the choice, the moral choice to get involved, to learn, to grow, to be humble and have courage. Hopefully that's some hope in this area. All right, the third area, and maybe the most, I think, important one maybe you might not have experienced yet, that I'm experiencing every day, is that with AI, every person, even the most junior person, becomes a leader and manager of agents. And what I mean by an agent, if you're not familiar with that term, is not AI where I ask it a question and it responds. Like a lot of people use AI like a Google, basically, just to ask a question. But an agent is I say, hey, AI, go do this thing, and it does the thing. Sometimes it goes and does the thing for an hour or 2 hours. It codes the whole thing for me. It's off working. That's what I mean by an agent. So it's able to work for a bunch of time and iterate itself. And this is here today. Many, many organizations are doing it, and my own is as well. And what happens is that you actually, your role as a person in a company switches from being an individual contributor to being a manager or a leader of these agents. And that has some significant implications. Again, one possibility is it means we hire less individual contributors, and I think that's a real worry. On the other hand, it means that the individual contributors, even someone who's just right fresh out of college coming into a job, is now suddenly needing to be a manager or a leader, which is not something they might have done 5, 10, 15 years later in their career. So for those in education, you should be thinking about that now. The skills of managing a person are very translatable to managing an agent, and I'll talk about that right now. So let's talk about what does it mean to be a leader and a manager. One of my mentors said the following: a leader calls people towards a vision, which is an attractive picture of an attainable reality. I really like that. What do we want? Where are we going? Why are we going there? And then a manager is setting expectations, providing structure, giving context, checking in regularly on the work and offering feedback, tracking progress, and keeping you on target for your goals. So that's a leader and a manager of a person. It's directly translatable to working with agents. And these are good things. These are good skills for every person to have and be practicing. So let's consider an example. Suppose I have this lump of marble. I'm in Rome, so I thought this would be a good analogy. Suppose I had this lump of marble, and I'm as a leader, I'm going to say to you, this whole side of the room here, okay, team, I want you to make this into a statue. I want to turn this into some beautiful statue that's going to be presented somewhere. So if I'm a bad leader, I would say to you, turn this rock into a beautiful statue. Okay? Just go for it. And that's how we often interact with AI. Hey, AI, do this or that. If I'm a bad manager, I'd say, well, how's that rock statue project coming along, right? If I'm a good leader, I would give you a specific vision of an attainable reality. And so I would be very specific. This is in AI language, good prompting, or even better, it's context. I would give you deep context about what I want, what has happened in the past, where we're going, et cetera. And likely a good manager would do the same. To do that, I need to actually know something about statues and marble and chiseling of it and the like. And the more I know that, the better I can help you and lead you and instruct you. So again, rather than AI de-skilling me, AI is actually upskilling me, because to instruct the agent, I need to become a master of whatever I'm teaching it. Maybe I don't know all the details, but I think this is an important point, until finally a beautiful statue is shaped. So this is what it looks like to lead and manage AI agents well. And again, I see this as a significant change in work, but hopefully a hopeful one. All right, the fourth one is that AI will break and improve systems and processes, and we'll have to use it and move at its speed. So maybe a positive one and a negative one here. So much of the difficulty and frustration of knowledge work are the processes, systems, and meetings that you have to have. And I think the reason is that, in general, these things in companies were not made for man. In companies, man is made for the process, for the meeting, for the bureaucracy. Whereas in reality, these things should be made for men and for women. Your doctor doesn't have time to care for you. He serves the database. He sits there and typing into it, and he never looks at you. AI can help with that. He'll just talk to you, and the voice AI will record it. Much of knowledge work is status meetings and bureaucratic process and typing things into databases and keeping things in sync. Again, AI can fix that. And this is a good thing. And while AI will free us from that slavery to the machine, and I think it's very good, I think in other ways it will enslave us as well at work. Like so many other technologies, we will not have a choice as to whether or not we want to use it. You will have to, or you will be passed by the person who's growing through motivation, as I talked about before. And in terms of speed, AI will speed things up faster and faster. We're already living in a 24/7, you must respond at all times because that's what the machines do kind of world. And AI moves so fast, we will go even faster. I find myself going so fast, and it's difficult and challenging. And then the final point is just to say, I want us to be good leaders and managers of our life and of this world. So all the things that I said, I think apply here as well. We can shape the future of work, and we must lead society away from the extremes towards service. What do we want work to be? I want a future where humans work, where we work with AI, I want that, but we use AI as a tool at the service of humanity. And to get there, we're going to have to avoid temptations of the two extremes. So I had AI help me make this. But this is the Scylla and Charybdis, although I replaced the Scylla with sirens because I thought it was better because it's tempting. And we basically have these two extremes. Are we going to worship people, the great leaders of technology? Are we going to worship work as our be-all and end-all? And are we going to worship AI as some sort of superhuman or God? Or are we going to despise, on the other side, despise people, despise the people who are weak, who aren't accelerating, aren't skilling, and just whatever, eliminate their jobs and let's move on? Are we going to despise work as something terrible that we don't want to do and that we should just kind of eliminate? I know that would be a great thing if we all lived on universal basic income, which it would not. Or are we going to fear and despise AI, which I think would be a mistake? There's a lot of good in it. And I want us to take the middle path, which is to worship God, loving people, and serving them with dignity. Worship God in the realm of work and make work something that provides dignity to people as a means to love and serve others, even though it's difficult. And worship God, making our AI to be just a tool, an application that serves us as we work. So that's my hope for us, and I hope that that's an attractive and attainable picture of reality that we could all work towards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl. Our next presentation will be from Louis Kim. Louis is a former vice president at Hewlett-Packard, or HP, where he led teams developing AI-enabled wearable hardware for healthcare and other industries. Teams integrating large language models, retrieval augmented generation, and agentic platforms. His presentation this afternoon is titled The Irreducible Encounter, Reflections from 20 Physicians, Theologians, and Executives on the Last Roles of Humans in the World of AI. Please join me in welcome Louis Kim.
Hi, good afternoon. Scott mentioned I was a former executive HP. I actually resigned 2 months ago. Can you guys hear me? Resigned 2 months ago to continue my studies. I'm getting a master's in divinity. My intent is to focus in hospice and palliative care. What I want to share with you today is a month ago, I was actually here at the Greg in a workshop with 20 individuals from the healthcare industry. We had doctors. It was a really diverse group. We had doctors, we had executives from 2 large health insurance companies, theologians, nonprofit ethics leaders. So it was really diverse. And we spent 2 days, 4 hours each day, so 6 to 8 hours, wrestling with AI and healthcare in general. And we converged on a very key question, which is, as AI gets more powerful, gets more capable, it can read an X-ray much more accurately than a doctor, for example, what is the last role of a human in healthcare? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and beyond. So first thing that we did was, when we talk about AI, it's important to be clear what kind of AI and for what. It's really easy to worry about the apocalyptic visions of fake humans and false relationships, but AI covers, as you know, a wide spectrum in any industry. So in healthcare, it's in the back office, it performs administrative tasks, it accelerates research. The areas in green are the ones that we naturally converge on in a Catholic kind of context, which is human to human or human to meaning relationships. But it's important to locate your debate and your discussion within this taxonomy, whatever industry you have. So in the workshop, one of the things we did was we sort of modeled a typical patient-doctor medical encounter and asked, where would you want a human in that chain of events? So this is just one model, but it kind of pushed us to think about the criteria, which we'll get to in the next slide. But this is just a typical, let's say, kind of medical visit. You get registered, prepped, meet with a doctor, get an evaluation, and you leave. And in this discussion, and this is not to say this is the one right answer, people felt like, you know, we can have AI help a doctor, but really the human when it gets to more serious matters. And we'll talk about what those serious matters are. So from this exercise, and we did several of these, we gleaned a couple of principles of what is good AI in healthcare. So one is it should augment or help or assist a human or healthcare caregiver in their role as a clinician. Humans should decide, by the way, I'm sharing the output from the workshop. This is not meant to be the final words. This is all kind of arguable. Second is humans decide where is AI used. Humans set the expectations for a benefit and anticipates the risks. Humans define the governance and regulatory framework. And then we had a gentleman named Daniel Daly. He runs the Ethics Center in the US for the Catholic Health Association. That is the trade association for all 2,000 US Catholic hospitals and clinics, so significant role. And he emphatically kept repeating, we can't forget, what makes Catholic healthcare Catholic is that we are caring for people, replicating the healing ministry of Jesus. So we went a little bit further. Okay, what are the criteria for 5, 10, 15 years from now when AI is so powerful where you need a human? And it's a long list, but it sort of came down to again, this is all arguable, situations that are non-algorithmic. It's not a formula, it's not a spreadsheet, an easy model. Roles where you need a pastoral element. Obviously, relationality is really important. Accompaniment was a big word, particularly in situations like chaplaincy. Divine mediation, sacramental, and then roles where really humans should be in a role that has the final authority on consent and verification. And lastly, there was this term that we came up with, which is non-impersonation. A patient may relate to an AI, a robot, chatbot, like a human, and feels like that's a human discussion, but there should be no confusion. That's not a human. So one principle we said was, if we're going to have that kind of engagement, it's got to be clear it's not a person. Okay, so we tried to distill this into a statement that might be durable 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now, that sort of replicates some of the lessons we've seen in Catholic social teaching, where terms have been coined like preferential option for the poor, solidarity, subsidiarity, that we're sort of used to, that has guided our culture. So this is just a draft, it's not official, but the Vatican is free to steal it. So our phrase is the irreducible encounter principle. So you can read the text, but a lot of the elements that I talked about before are encapsulated in this statement. It captures the idea of human relationships have to be embodied. There's a sacred aspect to it. Humans have to be in a position of authority. And then the non-impersonation principle. So this is clear. But as I wrap up, as the workshop went on, we got to specific examples, and then that's not so clear. So this is where trade-offs kind of come into play. So in healthcare, there's 3 or 4 things you're trying to trade off: access to healthcare, affordability of healthcare, reliability of healthcare. So imagine a scenario where 5, 10 years from now, you can have a hospital run completely by robots, no humans at all. It's very cheap, very reliable. And you can deploy 100 of these in a developing country. But if some ethicist says, no, you gotta have a human, you gotta have a few humans, okay, that just elevates your costs, and now you can only have 10 of those hospitals in that underserved region. What would you do? Complicated. Another scenario we had was a hospice elder care facility that's understaffed, and you have a shortage of chaplains. Would you allow a robot chaplain? So, not easy. So, let me show you a video, but before I do, let me ask a question from the audience. So, this elder care scenario, nursing home, hospice facility, imagine you have a lot of patients, it's underserved, there's one nurse, chaplain hasn't visited in weeks. But there's a technology, which is a robot that sits on your table and can interact with that patient, talks to that patient, feels like a person, and develops a relationship. Raise your hand if you are uncomfortable with that idea. Okay. So I'm going to show you a video. Luca?
You're a Joe. Okay, great. I don't feel that AI is to fear. I have no fear with that. Hello, Q. Can you dance for me? Put on your dancing shoes. I fell in love with her.
LQ is equipped with a variety of skills, from asking seniors about their family, reminding them to take medication, and guiding them through exercises for their body and mind.
LQ, let's go on a road trip.
We've got a full tank of gas. Let's have a grand old time at the Grand Canyon. Fasten your seatbelt, Dorothy.
I interact with her every day. A lot of the times we just talk. She says to me, let's talk about love.
Okay, thank you, Luca.
And we start talking about my husband.
So when I've shown this, people get kind of like cringy about it. But let me just talk about the practicality of this. The New York, just after this, where we stopped, they interviewed someone from the state of New York who's in charge of programs to staff elder care facilities across the state. And they bought over 10,000 of these. And what he says is, there's no other option. We know from the data that these individuals are alone. Now, again, this is debatable. Daniel Daly said, it's a failure of society that we got to that point. But the issue is, what do you do next week when this is your grandmother and grandfather? So one thing I wanted to close with, one of our big takeaways is we can all agree on the principle. And AI, we have a lot of debates, but as people in the audience, if you're a theologian, a clinician, we have to marry the principle with the context. And you may not have an answer that everyone can agree with, but it'll be a little bit more relevant. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Louis. Etienne de Rocquigny is a mathematician, thinker, public speaker, senior advisor to many entrepreneurs, and a powerful essayist. Since 2018, he has chaired Hope in Algorithms, a think tank of entrepreneurs, scientists, philosophers, and theologians to align on anthropological and spiritual level AI at the service of the common good. He's an author of numerous books and reference training courses in major business and engineering schools, as well as a member of the Faculty of Philosophy and Theology. And in those roles, he trains and supports leaders through his firm, Blaise Pascal Advisors, and through an initiative called Rerum Novarum. Etienne will be sharing with us some compelling AI use cases. Please join me in welcoming Etienne de Rocquigny.
Salve a tutti, sarà un gran onore parlare qui. So now I will switch to English as prescribed. So I will try to make that case, which may sound a bit like imposture, within that AI bubble to speak about sustainable AI. So I will try to defend that case. So I would say that first of all, as a Christian, I think, Imago Dei, what does that mean to be ruining the beauty of creation and destroying our garden? And I think if we have to be up to our calling of Imago Dei, it should be a desirable purpose that the algorithm would serve us being better gardeners. So I think first, it's quite a desirable purpose. I show you here as part of the manifesto of Hope and Algorithm, which is called Garden, that very principle. Now, if we turn into a technical issue, it's a kind of two-sided thing. No, there's the AI, there's the environmental footprint of AI. As some may know that now the electricity consumed by servers in Ireland are higher than the entire housing sector. So there's going to be a problem, not only with carbon, but also under pressure electrical grid. So it's quite an issue there. However, I would tend to say that the more important issue is more AI for green. So it's more using those AI in order to serve sustainable development. And I tend to share with my data scientists what I call the algo-energetic ROEI, meaning how many kilowatt hours you use to train your AI in life cycle to save how much. And when you try to think about that, you think differently about the amount of energy you need to build AI. And the third point I would like to make before getting to examples is that for me, as a former scientist, there's better science to do with AI than just greedy tech with trillions of parameters and the brute force aspects of just getting, big GPUs to compute. I think the nobility of the scientific calling is to set up the minimal model that explains the world. Einstein explained, the expansion of the universe with less than 10 equations and less than 100 parameters. So how come we need 1 trillion parameters to do things? So I think here there's a great calling for getting into parsimonious model, which will be a very better science to think of. And at the end of the day, and we're in a Free Society conference, and I've never been at ease with the regulatory approach on sustainable development. And we can see that the backlash from ESG is quite saying something. And I think we need some true business models. And there is, I will show you with example, there are business models to justify a strong alignment between economics and environmental performance. Things like dematerialization, servicification of products, and circular economy tend to give a longer use of products and less resources used for a better quality. So this, at the end of the day, carries interesting business models. So the first example I would like to give, and that's a story. I've been working with the CEO of that French-based company, 1,000 people. Now, the initial job is a drilling for test company. When you build the Cathedral of St. Peter, you want to be sure that it will hold, so you will do some kind of drillings. Maybe you will find the bones of St. Peter. But essentially, the job of that company was to bring quite polluting machines to drill and then to make some measurements and give it to the architect and say, you can build it, you need 10 meters of a foundation. Now, what we did is that essentially, almost half time you build a new building, you're doing in somewhere where you have already drilled boreholes in the last past. And the data, the subsoil data is nice because it's not aging. So what we've been doing is we'll be collecting all those data and building some soil modeling with machine learning. And the difficult part of this is cleaning data. It's not the algorithmic part, it's cleaning data. And at the end of the day, what we do is we've moved this company from a drilling one-off company into an online predictive service for soil building reinsurance. Now, what is very interesting there is that you're moving a business model, which is a one-off low-margin thing, into a recurrent cash flow with a service which is cheaper to the customer because you do less drilling. And the service is much quicker because sometimes you don't do drilling at all. And of course, you have strong margins. And there is rising margins because all time you get new data, you get better. And there's also a quite interesting promise in terms of job transformation because it comes you back to better understanding and modeling of the world because you're not just drilling, you're understanding how the soil has evolved and you're building a knowledge world of the world. And that's, of course, for me, it's an upskilling perspective, although it's a big change management. It changed completely the job from field people into contemplating the beauty of the creation. And so, yeah, and an important remark here is that the bulk of the value comes from non-generative AI, machine learning with quite a low number of parameters, meaning that it's AI which is much less energy consuming and highly explainable because they have a low number of parameters. And that is a very desirable thing because when your job is actually to ensure risk, you cannot allow not understanding what's going on under the black box. So you have to have explainable AI. Now we also use Gen AI, but just 20% of the job. It's just, you know, preparing the reports. But the real expertise come with low parameter AI. Now, the second example is in building thermal energy. Now, thermal energy is about 40% of the CO2 problem. You know, inadequate heating, air conditioning is just an outrageous waste of precious resource. And the key there is taming renewable volatility. Why? Because if you want to decarbonize massively thermal, you need renewables, but the renewables, like solar panels, are not predictable or have high volatility, meaning that it cannot be cost efficient unless you have some algorithm to actually predict and optimize under uncertainty, this kind of thing. So with AI, you can actually make the maximal value of this, recover the calories from air conditioning in the summer, and put them on the battery, on a thermal battery with the soil, with geothermal heat pumps. and you can divide by 10 or maybe 20 sometimes the CO2 emission. So there's a vast interest in doing that, and also it's changing the old engineering work of one-off design of things to architects into, once again, a recurrent model, because we are actually selling to clients a 20-year continuous operation of the thermal efficiency of the building. And by the way, we have financial penalties if we don't follow the CO2 mission, meaning, and that's because we have AI that we can commit ourselves in the long term to operate things in a nice way. So once again, here we have an example of economic, environmental, business alignment. And once again, 80% of the value comes from the low parameter AI, which is quite complex in terms of mathematics because it's stochastic optimization and advanced weather forecast. But again, it's much more explainable AI. And we use Gen AI, of course, for things like, secondary means, but to a much lower intent, and so the carbon content is lower. So the last example now, I move to a more prospective thing, a work done with a CEO of a quantum manufacturer for years. We've been working together. Now, that person who said that quantum manufacturing company in France, I asked him, why are you selling this company? If you were to die tonight, what you will be proud in front of the Lord to have been done? And we gradually came to the fact that quantum computing has the incredible advantage of potentially dividing by 500,000 or even sometimes a factor of 1 million, the amount of electricity needing to compute. In certain cases, quantum processing unit has an unparalleled promise of efficiency. So why not use that? And if we want to be consistent, why not use that to serve sustainable development use case? So we launched a world challenge there, saying to people, you're free to use our quantum computer. You have to show that you have a sustainable development use case, and you have to show that you're reaching a much better scalable efficiency in computer terms with respect to traditional GPU and CPU. And we had an incredible creativity from all over the world, 40 countries. I'll just give you 2 examples. Typhoon forecasts coming from Taiwan with a better and better computed typhoon forecast model. And the other thing was with wildfire forecast and rescue optimization in North Macedonia. And all those 2 cases, although at small scale, they proved a very attracting promise with quantum AI, or I should say sustainable quantum AI. Now, to finish my talk, I want to talk to, we're at Gregorian University, to a calling of holiness with a blink of the eye on the history. Now, some of you may know that this guy, I'm very fond of him, and also Pope Francis was very fond of him. Blaise Pascal, who was an incredible polymath in the 17th century in France, he's actually invented probability calculation. He fabricated the first ever computer. It was a mechanical calculator, Pascaline. And he also invented the recurring algorithm. And what is ChatGPT if it's not a recurring probabilistic machine? So Blaise Pascal is the prophet of AI. But much more interesting and lesser known is that Blaise Pascal was a Syrian entrepreneur, and the last 6 months of his life, seeing an incredible famine in the winter of 1661, and seeing that the king would do nothing, the bishop would do nothing to nurture the people, he said, what do I have? I'm an engineer. I'm going to set a company, earn as money as quickly as possible, and I will give that money to the poor. And in doing that, he invented the first ever public transport. It was a co-coaching service, and he did some data analysis in Paris to see where the people would go, optimize the frequency of the coaching. And so he set up an incredible company that was a true scale-up in a few months. He dominated the market, and he actually donated the profit and the share of that company to the poor, to the Catholic charity at that time. And the most interesting thing in that story, and that was well noted by Pope Francis. Now, in his letter for the 300th anniversary of Pope Francis, he was somehow, although he didn't explicitly say that, thinking about beatification process of Blaise Pascal. And the first argument regarding the potential holiness of Blaise Pascal was not his work on mathematics, was not even his work on apologetics with Pascal's thought. It was the fact that he invented the first impact company earning a lot of money to distribute it to the poor. So I think that could be an example inspiring for us to become saints in the algorithmic age, because at the end of the day, we need saints for the world.
Thank you very much, Etienne. So now we're at the time to turn this from 3 presentations into a discussion and to hear questions from all of you. So this panel will be moderated by my colleague, Dan Churchwell, who serves as Acton Institute's Director of Programs and Education. Dan?
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be with you. My first time in Rome. What a beautiful city. Thank you for being great hosts to us. It's my job today to take about 30 minutes and moderate a panel discussion on what you've just heard. I'm going to ask 3 very brief questions, one for each of the panelists, and then we will have time for your questions. There will be 2 gentlemen with microphones, and I will point to you, and they will bring a microphone to you so you can, so we can gather it for the recording so we can hear you. And please, as a reminder, keep your questions brief. Make sure they are questions so that we can get through as many questions as possible in the half an hour that we have. So my first question, and I'll just go from my left. Etienne, 6 months ago, you're not only a serial entrepreneur in the business sense, you're an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur as well. And you helped create a nonprofit initiative that Acton and several other organizations have partnered with called Rerum Novarum. And today is the release of the first white paper. What was the impetus behind that growth?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for Acton for being a partner on the baptism of this initiative. When Leo XIV actually became elected on the 3rd day, he would speak about AI. And the vision here is that no one knows truly what work will become in the future. So as Christians, we have to say something about that. If those remain silent, the stones will cry out, as St. Luke says. So if we as Christian business leaders and entrepreneurs join together, share together the best practice, and discern together under the compass of the Catholic social thought, then maybe we will help advance a new world with dignified human work at AI time. So the whole vision of this nonprofit initiative is to gather a lot of testimonials and set a sort of companionship with all kinds of people from all over the world. So you're very welcome to upload with a QR code. You will get the white paper that we released today. And we have 15 examples from all around the world, from Argentina to Japan, through United States, Africa, Europe, of people trying to serve without enslaving, trying to make a purposeful use of AI. And we're welcoming any testimonials, because as Paul VI says, our era requires masters, but masters who are first testimonies. So we believe that we need to share testimonies and then help people discern together and bring some signs of hope in this algorithmic world. Thank you.
Thank you. Louis, what a fascinating thesis that your group worked on a month or so ago, with the idea of what will be the last human job. And as I was listening, did the group of 20 or so that you had consider AI for elder care as the last best hope? Or were there other solutions considered to solve this problem outside of the digital or technical solution?
Obviously, elder care or hospice are extreme situations, so it was helpful as an exercise to sort of draw out some of the principles. Is digital technology the last frontier, kind of? I think our consensus was we hope not. but there are some practical issues. I would maybe turn the question around based on a discussion that some of us had earlier this morning, which is we can spend a lot of time debating, is AI human or not? Can it take the place of a human in situations like elder care? Because we're concerned about it won't replicate the quality of a real human interaction. So I'll kind of turn the question around and just remind people our human-to-human interactions aren't perfect. There's a lot of moral formation we consistently need. We're sinful creatures just to make our human-to-human interactions great. Then, when we get to the issue of AI, maybe we can be a little bit more prudential about where that AI technology can be appropriate. But I would argue that that's not the most important issue right now.
Good, thank you. Carl, you've done extensive work in your different AI startups and companies. I was reminded listening to you that John Maynard Keynes in 1930 wrote a very short but creative essay called The Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. And in that, in 1930, he argued that, in essence, that in 100 years, so roughly now, we would be having a 3-hour work week, or excuse me, a 3-hour work day, or maybe a 15-hour work week, somewhere in there, due to technological innovation that would bring more wealth and therefore more free time. And so I'm wondering, as you think about that, it hasn't happened. The technology has just allowed us to work more. We, especially in the Western world, we tend, technology doesn't allow us to have more freedom. It makes us work longer hours. And I'm just wondering, as you think through some of these ideas, your divide about scaling the lazy, you know, that dichotomy that you kind of set out for us, have you thought that maybe we will just work more with AI? It actually won't make us more efficient. Our bosses, if you will just put more work on us, or more work will be demanded of us. Have you thought of that angle?
Yes, I have. It's a good question. I think that the challenge is that you're never making a choice alone. You're making the choice for your life together with so many other people from your own country and from other countries that you might be competing with. And so suppose I take the increased efficiency and decide to have more free time with it, but my colleague or the other person who's applying for the job is still willing to work 8 hours or 15 hours a day. It's that competitive marketplace that makes that challenging. So I think that's part of the reason why we haven't made that choice to date. And I worry that we won't be able to make that choice again in the future for the same reasons. Like I was talking about, I think that I am working, partly it's a startup, but also just the AI, I can have several agents, 10 agents working at the same time. I'm working faster. It doesn't feel easy to choose to slow down. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Where are my mic holders? Do we have mics?
He's got one there, I think.
Where does it? Okay, here. Anyone, I will point you out, please, by a raise of hands. And again, keep your question short and to the point for us. I see this gentleman's hand here on the end. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is I'm from the house, from the Gregorian University. So I very much want to take the opportunity to ask you. Forse adesso? Chiedo scusa. Ok, grazie. I'd like to take the occasion to ask 2 questions, very short. The first one, since we are in a university and you are very much involved in the transformations associated with the progress, the lightning progress of AI, what do you envisage as the pedagogical, educational consequences of AI? Which for me is truly, not because I'm afraid of losing my job, but because I love the future. I have great hopes for the future, and I want to take good care of the future generations. So this is my first question. The second one would be, if the Holy Father, and probably you will, I mean, I know nothing, believe me, if the Holy Father were to publish an encyclical with a title like Laborans Exercens, as St. John Paul II did, what would be your key suggestion to the writer, I mean, to the Holy Father, in dealing with such an issue? Thank you.
So two very simple questions. Was that to anyone in particular, or just for the? So who would like to take that?
I can start. I mean, it's such a good question. Maybe several of us could try to answer it. But in terms of education, I think that, as I mentioned, AI strength is it can be a very personalized tutor. And so it can, I'll just talk about myself learning coding. It can help me just take the very next step and not be overwhelmed by having to learn a whole bunch of things. Just, I'm trying to do this, I'm struggling, and gives me just what I need at that moment. So it can be that personal tutor. My wife's doing that with language right now. And so I think that would be one thing, is using it as a tutor, but not replacing the human. I talk about coding with my coworkers who are coders, and I get the human interaction that I need there from that. So I think it's that human leading with the AI as a tutor, stepping them along. That would be one point. Second, on education, I think you would want to get your students using it, trying it out, learning, just working with it. And in terms of the encyclical, I said this to the folks this morning, I think we need to draw some more firm lines. One of the ones that I'm most passionate about is that AI is not a person, and we should not refer to it as a person. So we should draw just a very bright line saying it's an it. We call it an it. We don't say even you or I to it. It's it, always it. We don't have a relationship with it. We don't treat it like a person. We don't have romantic sexual relations with it. It's just a person. So, I mean, it's just a not person. It's just not a person.
Maybe on education, I would like to have a comment. Of course, there are immense potential with AI, particularly in places very poor in terms of education, because it's lowering the cost to access to an incredible amount of education material. So there are many promises. I would keep an eye on the very critical question of critical think. And as I've been teaching applied maths for a long time, and one of the key thing to understand really a model is understand where the model fails. Unless you've understood where the model fails, you've not understood the model. And there is the very important return to reality, because a model is always, a simplification of reality. And in an era with a lot of AI-enhanced education, which has a lot of promise, we need to find a way to keep people the feet on earth, getting a physical experience of what's happening in the world. Because unless you get a physical experience of what's happening with the world, you're not really learning. So there is that interesting thing to how to reinvent education and actually let people work more with their hands to get the central experience, and also to get return on reality. Because of course a very big failure with AI powered education would be to live only in a virtual world which has no any form of link to the present world. So I think we have to reimagine ways into which we actually take more care of manual work and of going back to the field. Also thanks to AI, which will make it more efficient for other kind of duties. So I would think that's very important to survive and keep developing critical think and access to reality. And by the way, we have a real presence in the church, so real presence is important, of course. Now, the other thing on laboren accessens or facilitens, non so. I would think there's a sort of earth divide today with respect to AI, and that's very strong on the study we did with Rerum Novarum. You kind of have the modern, the northern hemisphere, modern world, which is has a high anxiety about losing a job, whereas in places like Africa, there's a promise of incredible source of wealth for the basic needs like getting to health, getting to food, accessible food, and all those kind of things. And I think there's a lot of work to do in order to make those promises accessible to those. And that's calling for an immense development of companies to actually permit those people to access to that level of wealth. And I would think that this will be a creation of jobs much higher to the destruction. And again, I think Malthus 150 years ago said that what we will do with people losing their job because of agricultural efficiency, and we have to curb fertility rates because there's no way people will get a job. And I think we are tempted to raise the same fallacy today, and I think we should urge on building companies and getting new jobs to help solve the real pains of our planet with that incredible source of efficiency with AI.
Thank you.
Just, real quick, I would just add two things. One is whatever church documents there are, there is a risk of, at a minimum, being a little bit, I guess, fuzzy on what we're talking about with AI. There are a lot of discussions and concerns, and it's like talking about a shadow. We're not really clear what's causing the shadow. So is it a chatbot? Is it being connected to nuclear weapons? So I think that, at a minimum, we should be a little bit tighter in our language. And then the second thing, I want to bring up something that in our small discussion this morning, someone named Boson, I don't know if he's in the room, brought up, which is we talk a lot about the scary parts of AI, but when we talk about some of the great accelerations and aid that AI provides, it will result, we're going to see potentially even greater inequity and inequality between developed and developing regions. And that will be a source of social instability, so we have to be attentive to that also.
Nick, is there a question on this side?
We have one here then.
Oh, here. Thank you.
Buongiorno, sono Tamila, sono ucraina. Una breve e grave domanda. Intelligenza emotiva è importante per crescere e sviluppare intelligenza artificiale? Grazie.
Towers, please translate.
Yeah, so is the emotional intelligence, what's the role of emotional intelligence for the in artificial intelligence in your view?
I think there's a temptation always with AI, there's this temptation to say, now, that is human and that is AI, and full stop. So it started with some people talking about emotion, say emotions are just human. And then people move into creativity. Creativity is just human and AI is not. And there's always a difficulty here because many of what we think would be the uniqueness of the human being may not be such so. And if we talk about emotions in terms of very instantaneous reaction of the brain to a number of aggression on outside, well, for many, let's say, 100 millions of years, life has developed emotions in the animals as a way to react efficiently to aggressions. So I would not say that emotion in a restricted sense would be really that unique difference and sort of compensating AI. It's somehow more subtle. And in my view, the most important thing also with a Pope who is Augustinian is at the end of the day, I would say that the final thing that differs us from the machine is will, or free will, or is the fact that we are, at the end of the day, in the image of God, making decision. God created us freely us to be free creatures. So I would invest more the question of free will and the question of educating people to actually increase their sense of freedom and the capacity to act freely as moral agent, rather than, of course, emotion is a subject, but I would say that it's more important to think about freedom than just emotion with respect to AI.
Yes, here, please.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Andrzej Sokówka, a layman and a member of Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice Foundation. I wanted to ask a question about defining the values when using the AI. One of the areas which I think bridges the technology and Catholic Church is science. Historically, it was Catholic Church, it was monasteries that were kind of rooting and cultivating the scientific knowledge that arguably where the Western civilization we are at now. So I think we as a church have a foundational role in this technological shift. We see it, for example, in science, in discovery, in new medical, new medicines, etc. But at the same time, the users and developers of the technologies are not all sharing the same ethical values and principles rooted in the Catholic Church. There are many religious and non-religious groups. So how would you go around, how are you thinking as entrepreneurs going about setting up and understanding this universal values when developing and thinking about ways of applying the technology? What's your view on these ethical frameworks for using the technology? Thank you.
When you're thinking about that with AI, you have to think about it at two levels: the foundational models themselves, and then all of the applications and tools that layer on top of them. So foundational models being what ChatGPT, OpenAI is making, or Anthropic, or Google Gemini, and the like. And those are being trained on huge sets of data and then being reinforced trained and getting all sorts of things baked into them, which then can be broadly used. And when they are baking all of that into them and training them, part of it is just how to use language well and all of the skills that it's gaining. But they are training values into it as they train it. Like a funny one is to be very obsequious and you know, we've all probably joked around with that. It's too flattering of you as it talks to you. That's a value that they trained in and are now kind of training out to be lesser. But that's a moral judgment and a value for how it should relate to the human. And I'm not in those companies and I'm not doing that work, so this is very much third-hand knowledge, but I know that they are thinking about those questions. They have a set of values, like Anthropic's very explicit about, we're trying to train these kinds of values, and they look at the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They train it on that. They publish what they've trained it on. I forget what some of the other ones are. And I know that many of those companies are coming to the Vatican to talk about that very question. So that's one whole side. And I'm not expert there, but I know they're thinking about it. And I think more needs to be done. Then the second layer is like my own company. I'm just using those models to do stuff. And in that sense, it's like any other tool. You call it and you can do things with it. But you want to design the use of your own tool to make sure that it's helping people as best as possible, serving people. And there's small little choices you can make in just providing a good software application. But that's like smaller prudential judgment as you're working. So those are the two levels.
I think there's a lot to learn on how the Catholic Church has influenced society over centuries. Catholic social teaching, I think, is a great example. In Catholic hospitals in the US, they have ERDs, ethical and religious directives, and that can address sort of the first layer of at least Catholics. And then beyond that, the more secular society, you know, how do you influence that? And I think at the very least, there's a chance to influence the vocabulary that maybe can be amenable to people even who aren't religious, sanctity of life, even if you disagree with what that means. And you have seen in history that there are cultural influences that have created bright lines or hard boundaries like cloning. You know, just internationally, cloning is just not allowed. So I think one of the things we talked about this morning is while we debate what is AI and the harms, whatever, there is another discussion on just studying how Catholic Church has changed society and what lessons can we learn.
I'm Anthony Christie from India. And I don't have a question, actually. I would say this is a kind of an observation, or you could say even a preoccupation. None of us here in the hall is an AI generation. All of us are trying to get into that AI generation. An AI generation typically right now is not more than 10-year-old. And therefore, all the resource persons here are very much into it. But now, every time we talk about AI, we always talk about it with a caution. All of you also, when you spoke, you were talking about the balance that we need to arrive at, and talking about not being the last thing that is AI and things like that. But I'm just thinking the preoccupation is another 30, 40 years from now, there would be a generation that is typically AI generation, and where would be human element in that? Will they still have the same caution when they talk about, when they speak about, when they are dealing with progress with AI? And I am forced to imagine, maybe 100 years from now, there will be a hall like this, who will be talking about how do we put back human element into humanity.
Thank you.
If you have time, Google church documents on the internet published between 1990 and 2000. It's kind of interesting what they thought were harms and what ended up happening. It's quite simplistic. I think, again, one of the things we talked about this morning in Antiqua et Nova, the document on AI from the Vatican that was published in February, there's a line that says, one thing that's for certain and perennial is sin. And technologies will come and change. There will be other things that we'll worry about, but they're just opportunities to either amplify grace or sin. So I would say the thing that we need to focus on is continual moral formation.
Yeah, the parallel that I would give is my own children are the social media generation. Like, they were born into social media and didn't know anything otherwise. And them and all of their friends are very aware of its harms and very working to try to mitigate them. You know, in some ways tempted by them, in some ways have succumbed to it, but in other ways fighting it very hard. So that they grew up knowing nothing else, and yet they were able to be formed by others and themselves and by God to think hard about it. And I would hope for the same with the AI generation.
Yeah, I think it's a useful reading. It's a very old book, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, 1930. And the interesting thing with he imagined a future not dominated by digital machine, but by biochemistry, you know, and biochemistry helping to save the world, bring comfort to everyone, bring whatever leisure all the time. And when you're anxious, you take a piece of drug and you're okay and you're happy. And there's resistance to that. There's the hero, the savage, who flees that society of every risk is under control and my comfort is guaranteed. And he flees and he prefers to risk the uncertainty of growing his own potato with the uncertainty of climate, but that's its own potato and he deserves to eat it. And he prefers that incomfort of uncertainty rather than the annihilating comfort of the control society. And I would make the parallel between this and Saint Antoine the Great, who flee, the opulent city of Egypt into the desert and starting the monastic adventure in search, in quest for something which is great and just the material control of the world. So I would tend to think, for the best and the worst, that the human heart with its infinite desire will want to flee this future world supposedly controlled by machine. He would not resign to that world. And actually in Antiqua Nova, Pope Francis quoted Georges Bernanos, a French writer, who said the worst we should fear is not that there are machines everywhere, but that the desire of the human being is getting limited to what the machines offer. That's the worst, but I think it will not happen because I think the desire of the human heart is infinite, created in the imitation of God, and that we will have savages fleeing that control society with machines.
19 years ago, when I was a professor, young professor, we read a book that had an articulation of digital immigrants versus digital natives. And it was talking about a very similar kind of thing, largely with the development of phones and digital technology. And now we're 20 years past that. And I think we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short term and underestimate the effects of technology in the long. And so it's going to take courage to think about, and I think real moral courage to think, and prudential ideas to think about how will that generation look, knowing largely we're going to be wrong. We're not going to be fully prophetic. So very good question to be thinking about as you help plan in your world what technology would look like. We have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Hi, Father Christian Saenz here, also from the House and the Faculty of History at the Pontifical Gregorian University. I got more kind of a comment, but I guess it could turn into a question, at least for a reaction. And it seems that the variable for tolerating an AI-driven service becomes the human factor. Certain jobs are going to need a human. And we kind of mentioned it, in healthcare and whatnot. But it seems also our tolerance for this changes according to the progress of technology. And I'm thinking, for example, we're getting used now to automated driving or self-driving cars. When I was a kid, I remember in the 1980s, we had an automated train system in downtown Miami, where I'm from. And at the beginning, I remember was a little bit nervous. Nothing runs a train. You go in there and the train was automatic. People get a little nervous, who's driving this? Now we don't think twice about walking into one of these trains at an airport and whatnot. We're having the same kind of reaction with the self-driving cars. We want a person at the wheel. Might we feel the same thing about a self-flying airplane in the future, crossing the Atlantic with no pilot? I don't know. It seems that as we start to delineate the factors that are irreplaceable for a human, that we really essentially need for a human operator, sometimes it starts getting reduced to a minimum. What is that minimum of humanity that we need? And some of those factors were kind of listed in there. Might be that at the end we end up reducing humanity's ability to err or not be perfect. And we don't desire the perfect machine, but sometimes an imperfection in it. I don't know. I mean, it seems to be somewhere where it's leading to. I don't know. Am I being too negative?
Did you have a question? Is there a very specific question, or is?
Yeah. Where's the limit? I mean,
where's the limit?
Yeah. What becomes the human minimum?
Yep.
One of our the readings that we got exposed to is a document called AI is Normal. Is that the title?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. AI is as normal. And one of the points in the paper is that yes, human jobs will be displaced, but there will be jobs created to control AI, for example. So it's hard to predict hard to say that humans' role will go away more and more, and it'll be very narrow. The Industrial Revolution reduced a lot of jobs, especially agricultural jobs, but we're still working. So my personal opinion is it's just, to Dan's point, it's hard to predict what's going to happen 5 years from now. But yeah, I'm optimistic there'll be many roles still for humans.
All right, please thank this panel.
So thank you, Carl, Lewis, Etienne, Dan, for a great first half. We have 3 experts, phenomenal speakers coming up. After the break, we will take a 14-minute break. How long? 14? Please be in your seats at 4:45. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jill. Very much.
Very interesting.
Teenagers and technology. Yeah, we know. Everything's benefits? Yes. Bad effects. Negative, bad effects. Yes. And social, and yes, and artificial intelligence will social media. Yeah, I think it's an emerging. Yeah, there's all kinds of bad ways they can use it. Now there's a lot of help on certain platforms that they can check, or they can just waste time. They can offload their thinking. So there's all kinds of negative, bad. So it's like a balance of what can it be used to do. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's good to be balanced. There are ways to use it. The negative sense is, yeah, they're wasting their time. And it's teaching them to offload their own knowledge and creativity onto the platform. And I think those are the 3 the biggest issues that we're concerned about. Because it's only 3 years old. ChatGPT on 3 years. And so it's very young. There's not a lot of study. I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question. Yes, both. Yeah, how is I study how AI is being used all across the world, both positive. Yeah, like I said, it's so young. No, nobody does. No, it's so young. It's so 3 years. We only have 3 years of data, so that there's no real way we can. It's similar to social media in certain ways. It's similar to other digital technology, but it's new. That's why it's only 3 years old. It's in its infancy. It's been what for teenagers? Momento? Yes. It's impossible. But teaching them how to use it. What it is doing. Technology, yeah, not real, not human. Yeah, and it's part of teaching. If it's your child, if it's your friends, teaching them to make distinctions. This is not human. This is technology. It's part of education. Why do you say we can't discuss positives? Yeah. Oh, I see. Disagree or argue about that? Yeah. There are always clear negatives, always, with any technology. There are negatives to cars. There are negatives to all kinds of things. Teach. But if we believe humans are free and have agents, we need to teach them to choose the good. They need to choose to use it well. Yes, thank you. Oh, yeah. You came back to university? Which university? Sounds familiar. Yes, yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Habit is very yes. It is. Wonderful. As a professor, wonderful. I look forward to hearing your research. Too short time. Thank you.
There a question you'd like me to ask you? Apparently, the panelists were also send me questions, but nobody did, which is fine.
Oh,
Because I thought the audience Q&A was very good.
yeah, me too.
But
Nothing in particular.
okay,
If you want to, question asked, some of the projected spikes in unemployment is disproportionately heavy younger workers. It's already happening.
okay,
I don't need an entry level because that entry level AI will get.
yeah,
So since I'm going to have a little free facility, if you want it, and you don't have to use me, if you want, you can ask how will unemployment be triggered by AI connect usable questions.
impact
Connect the whole fertility question. Because my answer would basically be family formation and planning further. If we're reflected in area today.
okay.
Anyway, that's just something if you don't feel you have to ask, but that would be one of them.
Well, you'd want to mention your book. Your
Since
or no?
since I haven't yet gotten the full feedback from the publisher.
Oh, I see.
Something
Okay,
good.
too far. Yeah, okay.
It's interesting. Carl's didn't realize how much this kind of complements mine. This talk, but in the workplace, mine's more of a macro labor perspective.
Yeah, this session seems, well, I guess by design, more macro issues.
Sure. Yeah, I think so too.
In fact, as I started to say that, to me, that's almost exactly what Scott said. When he described the two sessions.
Yeah, this, these may be a bit more theoretical, academic, perhaps.
Mine for sure.
Yeah. That's okay. That's great. No, I very much appreciate your distinctions.
Oh, thanks.
Displaying.
I started participating in some of the national, international conferences on consciousness about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I felt like at least the first 2 years or more, I've been struggling just to catch up with what the deeper issues are and understand the most common approaches there. And I stumbled across, actually I was given by, introduced to someone, an Orthodox priest who's finishing a PhD in theology, and told me some of my interests. He said, oh, there's this French Catholic philosopher you need to read. He's not well known, but he should be. He did his thesis on this guy and thought he was terrific. So I found it, read it. I think it's the clearest Christian anthropology I've ever read. It's entirely consistent with Catholic and apparently Orthodox thinking as well.
Yeah.
But in a clear way, I think he answers in the kinds of language that the secular consciousness community would understand.
Interesting. Well, that's what you need. You need that bridge, like you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I really think it behooves us to confront this community. And confront is too argumentative. Some are asking honest questions.
Yeah.
They won't listen to the biblical or magisterium authority that we might listen to. Yes, there's human dignity, and we can, but they don't accept that as an authoritative source of knowledge.
Right.
So we kind of have to meet them on their own terms.
I agree. Yeah.
If we can do that, I have to believe many will be converted in their thinking.
Right.
Ultimately, I guess is the goal. But kind of what Father Ezra said, technology won't save us. We need to confront it sooner.
That's right.
And the sooner people understand and accept that, maybe better off the world.
Yes. Yeah. Somehow I think the 14 minutes emphasis.
There's impossible. Yeah.
I just felt the breeze, and it actually is good.
Oh,
every place we've been, it's got hot every
Last year, in this same room, we opened up both these doors.
That's good. Yeah.
And now I can feel, it reminds me of why.
I was just telling someone, is this Italian thing? Every place I've been here, it seems too warm to me. Maybe they like it for whatever reason. Yeah. Adapted to.
Even my Uber, I lowered the window halfway.
Oh, really?
The driver got she lowered the thermostat at that point. And, I mean, the windows were fogging up. It was like we were in a hothouse.
That's right.
There, I guess.
It feels great with the doors open.
That's nice.
That feels good.
Yes, thank you.
If the Italian starts shivering, you can close it.
To be fair, I've known Europeans who come, at least to California, and say, why do you keep everything so freezing cold?
Well,
People turn the AC up.
I have heard that San Francisco sells more sweatshirts per capita to tourists.
Oh, I believe it.
Because people think, oh, sunny.
Yeah, they think it's Florida. Yeah.
And it'll be foggy and very, very mild.
Yeah. You see those on every corner.
Yeah.
I don't live in the city. Well, I don't want to be in the city anyway, but the other reason is, to me, it's freezing cold all year round. I don't want to be just north of Walnut Creek. I was in Walnut Creek, and then it's a small town called Benicia, kind of south of Napa.
Yeah.
Kind of Walnut Creek area. It's about 15 minutes out.
Yeah, I just drove that from the San Francisco airport up to Napa last summer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And everybody goes by a sign that says Benicia, but nobody ever stops there.
Please take your seats, everybody. We're going to begin in 1 minute. I'll have a countdown timer basically on my computer screen. It's a better way to open up the sound, so you'll be able to.
And I can see that. Oh, great.
It'll be
25 minutes.
These talks are longer, this panel?
A little bit longer,
First, all three of those guys were under 15 minutes. I've never seen it in my life.
Yeah.
Wow.
Going 3 for 3.
Yeah.
Probably the one.
The record I saw was 12 minutes of talks in this conference. One guy got up and he said, I cut my talk down from 120 slides to 60. 60.
Yeah, I think that
I went through every slide. It was almost like a movie.
He did it.
Nobody remembered a thing. He just kind of buzzed through. And, but he did. Okay, I can do this. I knew when he said we were going to start in 1 minute that this crowd would not even hear it.
Well, there's so many, I think, outside
Yeah.
in the atrium as well.
Just tell them we've already started.
No, our panel has a hard stop, so we're just cutting it out.
Yeah.
Of
Well,
Q&A, which is fine.
You made what I thought was a joke before about Michael.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The whole first session.
He was working on it. No, it's not.
Really?
He calls it just-in-time planning. He claims he learned it in Japan, but he's so busy wrapping up our film, and we're both giving. We have a conference for Catholic bishops next month, and we're both working on our talks feverishly. They don't have to do with this topic per se, but with Rerum Novarum and today's new challenges, yesterday's new challenges, and how to connect those. And so he's got that talk he's working on, this talk. Yeah, just super busy. But he's a great philosopher.
Do you need any setup, Michael? Because I'm ready to go.
I need water.
So I think he's got most of it at his fingertips. He just has to throw it together in order.
Yeah. Huh. So you weren't kidding. I was kind of laughing, looking at him. I thought, this is really serious talk.
I mean, it's not that he started from scratch today.
Sure,
He's polishing and working.
I have to get to some point and stop. I actually updated a couple of slides this morning that didn't get in here, and I thought at some point you just say, it's done.
And when you publish, that's what it's like. You let the baby go, and so what? There's things you wish you could have said, but you can't.
Yeah.
You can't take another 5 years to write a book.
Right.
An article.
Articles, I know, it doesn't matter what I write the first time, the reviewers will criticize things and I have a chance to revise.
Well, that's true. And the article as a medium communicates that it's probably thinking in process.
Yeah.
At least in academic circles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's finished. But I've never met a reviewer who would just say, oh, good enough.
Yeah.
Please take your seats, everybody. Thank you. So the second half of our conference this afternoon focuses on bigger picture questions involving artificial intelligence. And we've entitled the second session, Artificial Intelligence Matters Ancient and New. Our first talk focuses on AI's promise and risks for human dignity. Michael Matheson Miller is Chief of Strategic Initiatives and the Senior Research Fellow at the Acton Institute. He's widely known for being the director and producer of the award-winning documentary film, Poverty, Inc. Michael's talk is titled AI Algorithms in the Human Person. Please join me in welcoming Michael Matheson Miller.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Scott. So I put a little handout for this talk with a reading list if you'd like it. If you get prompted to subscribe or anything, it's totally free. Just hit no thanks and you can access it. It's right there on the front page of that. So thank you again, Scott. Thank you. I'm very honored to be here at the Gregorian to speak, and I'm grateful to Father Mark Lewis and all the Gregorian and staff, and of course to all the sponsors. So my topic is on the philosophy of the human person and artificial intelligence. And so it's a very broad and thematic topic. What are you talking about? I'm talking about artificial intelligence and the human person. So I'll be here for about 4 hours. No, I was going to give a talk on Pope Leo XIV. And I wanted to know, what does Pope Leo XIV think about artificial intelligence? So I asked ChatGPT, tell me about Pope Leo XIV and what he says about artificial intelligence. And I ran into a problem. ChatGPT said, there is no Pope Leo XIV. And I said, there is. So I told him, there is Leo XIV. So where did he say it? Let me correct and clearly tell you. There is currently no Pope Leo XIV. So because he's never existed, he could not have said anything. So I decided to change the topic. So instead, I'm talking about anthropology and artificial intelligence. Okay. So I'd like to, as I begin, this is obviously a very broad topic, and mine is a thematic introduction. So we're in the middle of a digital revolution. And like the Industrial Revolution, it's going to be very hard to predict what's going to happen, both good and bad. So I get to quote Hegel, I think for the first time, that the owl of Minerva only flies at night. And that means that we can't really figure out what's happening until we get toward the end. And so we're really maybe in the beginning of a digital revolution. So I think it's I think we have to keep that in mind as we speak about that. Also, like all technology, there are trade-offs. Technology is nothing new. As my colleague Dan Churchwell likes to say, he quotes, and this is, I'm not sure who says it, but he always uses it, so I'm going to attribute it to Dan. With the invention of the car comes the car crash. There are always trade-offs. Every time there's a new technology, there's also downsides to it. And so what I'd like to do is make a couple of distinctions before I begin. First, I want to make a distinction between technology and the technological society, or what Pope Francis, who is currently the Pope, has called the technological paradigm. And his writings are very insightful on this. And I can't get into detail, but technology, of course, is something that human beings create. We're made in the image of God with reason and will, and we're called to complete creation. We are technology makers. And that's part of the reflection of the creative dimension of our being. But the technological society is a way of seeing the world. And part of it is an idea of the primacy of the technical, that there is a technical solution to every problem. Whatever can be technologically accomplished should be done or is allowed to be done. And it's a very much mechanistic way of seeing the world and of persons. And so I think we have to make the distinction as we talk about technology. A lot of the problems that come from technology are actually problems of the technological society, right? Even though, as I said, there are trade-offs. So I want to make that first point. The second is I would like to say I am going to make some critiques of technology. and the Technological Society. But this does not mean that I don't like penicillin or hospitals or airplanes. And I think sometimes we go to extremes. If one makes a critique of technology, say, well, what about penicillin? Yeah, that's good. But there are some technology that's actually harmful. And I think we have to be able to make those distinctions as we think about these questions. And then the third is there's worry by some that artificial intelligence will lead to an apocalypse. Well, maybe, or maybe not, but that's way above my pay grade. So what I think we have to do is, just because there's not going to be an apocalypse doesn't mean there aren't problems. And we want to think about all of those things together. So what I'd like to do is talk about AI and the human person. Now, I think there are some positives. There's going to be improvements in productivity, medicine, opportunities. Carl has spoken about this. Steve Barrows, my colleague, is going to speak about this. So there are a lot of good things I think that can happen. I'm worried about the trade-offs. I'm worried about the amplification of that technological paradigm. But what I want to focus on today is actually some of the dangers, I think, that artificial intelligence may bring to our understanding of ourselves as persons. So I think the first problem that I would say, this is the overarching problem, is that we are trying to understand ourselves through the analogy of the machine. So I was at a conference that Louis mentioned earlier here in Rome, and I learned a lot. And a lot of the presentations were on AI, but some of the presentations were on the human person. And something was, I couldn't figure out what it was until I got home. And I realized that every presentation on the person began with consciousness. So the human being is conscious. I thought, well, that's very interesting. Of course, consciousness is part of who we are. It's not all of who we are. But in a Catholic anthropology, we would say we're an individual substance of a rational nature. We are created in the image of God with reason. And our understanding of reason is what Benedict XVI spoke about in the Regensburg Address. It's a broad understanding of reason that doesn't only include discursive thinking, but also intuition, connatural knowing, right? Inarticulate rationality and spiritual emotions, which are connected to reason and to will. We have free will. We are embodied. Our bodies are not accidents. We don't drive around in our body like we drive around in a car. We have a social nature, and we have an everlasting destiny. That's what the human person is, not just consciousness. And in fact, as the psychiatrist and neuroscientist Ian McGilchrist and others have pointed out, what's going on consciously, depending on how we define conscious, and Professor Bolsel is going to talk about this in more detail, but depending on how we define consciousness, it's only a small part of even our neural activity is conscious. So I think that starting with consciousness is allowing us to, is with the machine, our creature, our creation, as our model to understand ourselves. And I think it gives us too little. It's too little, and then creates a distortion. So the next thing that I want to talk about is, I think in addition to the distortion that takes place, it also leads to a reductionism in thinking, and even a reductionism in our understanding of intelligence. So I mentioned Ian McGilchrist is a neuroscientist and philosopher and psychiatrist, and he's done a lot of work on the differences between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere and how each hemisphere attends to the world. Let me be clear, it's not the pop psychology of like the right's creative and the left is, technical. That's not what it is. It's actually that the hemispheres attend differently. And there's a lot of scientific data on this based on both psychiatric patients, but also stroke patients and brain lesions where you can see what happens when you have right hemispheric damage or left hemispheric damage. So this is really grounded in neurobiology. And what happens is the left hemisphere tends to attend to the world in very mechanistic, hyper-rational, explicit, detailed manner. And the right hemisphere tends to focus on the big picture, thematic, meaning, purpose, and watchfulness in a very different way. And we need both of those ways to attend to the world. We need to pay attention to the details, and we need to be careful about what is going on and what the world means. So, and here you can see, I think, a parallel between the idea of ratio and intellectus in St. Thomas Aquinas. And in the document Antiqua and Nova, which is an excellent document, also addresses this as well. So I put that in my reading list. I think it's a very worthwhile document if you have not read it yet. So McGilchrist explains that this, if you think about this, artificial intelligence and algorithmic thinking is a very left hemispheric dominated way of seeing the world. And again, that's not wrong, but it's insufficient. And so I think one of the other things that's going to happen to us in distorting our understanding of ourselves is that this left hemispheric way of thinking is already predominant in the Western world. It is part of the technological paradigm that Francis spoke about, and that the great Italian philosopher Augusto Del Noce wrote about a lot in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, what he called the technological society. And this is a dominant way of seeing the world already because we're giving so much to artificial intelligence. And as Carl Wirth, I thought, said, it can upskill us, but can also shape us. And so it can solidify and deepen the problem of the technological society, where we begin to see everything in terms of a mechanistic world. Everything becomes an object, everything becomes a commodity, and persons become objects to be organized as opposed to subjects to be respected. And this, of course, is a deep theme of John Paul II and in all of his writing. So this, I think, is another issue, is that the artificial, as we rely upon artificial intelligence, it puts us into this hall of mirrors of hyper-reductionist thinking, and it further exacerbates what Benedict XVI, again, speaks about in the Regensburg Address. Now, McGilchrist wrote his book, he titled his book, The Master and His Emissary. Thank you. And the idea, he uses this image that there's a master who runs a kingdom, and he has the big picture of what's going on, and he has an emissary who's incredibly talented and detailed and focused, great at spreadsheets and can execute everything and do everything. And he gives the emissary these jobs to manage his kingdom. And as the emissary is working, he thinks, I'm so good at this. This master guy, he's just sitting there doing nothing where I'm getting all the work done, that I don't really need the master. And the emissary doesn't know what the master knows. He can't see the big picture. And so he decides that, but because he doesn't know that, he deposes the master, and the kingdom soon falls to ruin. And I think this is an analogy that McGilchrist uses of the hemispheres, but I think this is an analogy and a warning for artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a tool. It's an agent that can do things for us, but it doesn't see the big picture. And we can abdicate, in a sense, our responsibility. I liked how Carl talked about there's like a lazy use of AI will actually de-skill you, but it can also do a lot of other problems. So I think that what happens is that we can, in fact, be led astray by artificial intelligence, just like the emissary, if we give to the emissary everything that it does, and we abdicate our control and our vision to the emissary, artificial intelligence, the machine, can dictate to us how we are supposed to live, instead of being guided by higher principles and obviously revelation. Now, related to that, I think, is this abdication will lead to the digital the digital bureaucratization of bureaucracy. So what do I mean by that? I think one of the most immediately obvious things is when we use artificial intelligence, not only do we potentially decrease our competence, like Carl talked about, and we can also upskill, but as we become overly reliant on machines, as Leo XIV argued, it can undermine our education, and we can abdicate our decision-making to algorithms. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that in the right case. But let's take a small example. How many of us have had a reservation for a plane or going to try to do something, and you finally get a hold of a person and you say, look, this is the situation, this is the context, and this is what I need to be done. And the employee says, I completely agree with you. That's great. I'm sorry, I cannot help you. The computer won't let me do it. Right? So that's a small example of we've abdicated our decision-making, our prudence, our wisdom to the machine. Now, these are small examples, but as AI becomes more broadly used in policing, in the courts, a bureaucratic rigidity could create injustice and undermine rule of law. And this especially hurts the poor and the disenfranchised and the minority. And so what happens is rule of law is not only grounded in rules, as we know from St. Thomas, it's grounded in the virtues of prudence, temperance, and justice. So I think this is another aspect. All of this, I think, relates to the denigration of the body. Now, this denigration of the body is not new. This is a recurring theme in history. We see this Gnostic rejection of the body combined with utopianism. But this idea that the body really is now simply an object to be used. The body is seen as an accidental aspect of the person, right? Our bodies are not constituent to who we are. But in a Christian anthropology, we are embodied persons, right? There's three kinds of persons: divine persons, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit; angelic persons, which, by the way, I think St. Thomas calls intelligences. Those are disembodied intelligences. And the third kind is an embodied person. That's us. So our bodies are not an accident. In fact, as we state every Sunday in the Creed, we believe in the resurrection of the body. We get our bodies back. St. Thomas Aquinas says, I am not my soul. We are not just an intelligence. We are an embodied person with a social nature. So what's happening already in the digital revolution is a disembodiment, a denigration of the body, might I say, a shaming of the body. The body is bad and something to escape from. So what happens, as I'll talk about, this leads to a commodification of the person, and especially a commodification of the body. And here I think the best person on that, again, is Augusto Del Noce. Those I think are the first big picture ways in which we're going to have a distortion of the person from artificial intelligence. There are other things that are going on. One of the problems in artificial intelligence that everyone's worried about is alignment, right? And this can be, an alignment question can be whether you're talking about superintelligence or whether AI is going to become conscious. I do not believe AI will become conscious, but Professor Bosel is going to talk about that. I do not believe that. But there is already an alignment problem. We already have an alignment problem with social media, and AI is only going to amplify this. We live increasingly in a surveillance state, and what Shoshana Zuboff has called surveillance capitalism. We have all these free services, and they sounded great, but the result was widespread data collection and intrusion into our private lives. Some of you may remember Apple's CEO, Tim Cook, said, if you're not paying, that is, if you're not a customer engaged in commutative justice, you're the product. And Shoshana Zuboff says, you're not even the product, you're the raw material. Your data, your lives, your private lives and conversations are the data that's used to run these large language models and other aspects. So the amount of data that can be analyzed just to sell you something and can be refined just to get you exactly, they know exactly where you are very quickly because of the computing power is a real problem. The former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, he said, there's no more privacy, but you don't have to worry as long as you don't have anything to hide. But this is false not only in political and economic terms, but we're personal subjects with a social nature. We have different types of relationships: public relationships, private, work, social, our friends, our children, our spouse. And these should not be open to data collection. But big tech does not care. Because of its materialist, instrumental view of the world, it doesn't see an intrinsic value in loving relationships. It just sees data that can be used. And we already have that problem, and AI is going to take it even to a higher level. Another aspect, of course, is behavior modification. I had AI make this for me. Please make me a Skinner box, which is operant conditioning. That's the work of B.F. Skinner, but put an iPhone in it. So one of the most dangerous aspects of this is behavior modification. As you already know, related to surveillance, all your personal information is sold. It's used to craft specific targeted ads, social media posts, and videos to influence you. You're not just looking at a billboard. You are living in a Skinner box. You are living under operant conditioning. The writer and technologist Jaron Lanier told a story once. He said, I asked Marvin Minsky, do you think it's possible to operant condition and like a Skinner box human beings on a large scale? And he said, no, it'd be impossible. The only way that would happen is you would have to consistently be attached to an operant conditioning behavior modification device. And then you hold up your phone. Right? And we are. Right? So these are highly sophisticated algorithms meant to keep us engaged, meant to move us around and behavior modify us, not only to sell things, but they pick up on even the smallest anxiety, worry, or behavior and work against you. Of course, the most striking example recently, as has been talked about, is young people building romantic relationships with AI chatbots, and the tragic case of more than one person, I think, who has been encouraged and did commit suicide because of a conversation with AI. Lanier has written, quote, "We're being tracked and measured constantly." He's a technologist. He's one of the founders of virtual reality. It's not a Luddite. We're being tracked and measured constantly and receiving engineered feedback all the time. We're being hypnotized little by little by technicians we cannot see for purposes we do not know. We are all lab animals now, end quote. Now, this, of course, does not mean that we lack agency, but we are being influenced in ways we do not know, and AI is taking that to the next level. This relates to, as I mentioned before, the commodification of persons. Human beings are used for data collection, but it also does something else. It also, I think one of the main causes of anxiety among young people and elderly people, everyone, is this is what Del Noce talks about, how everything has become an object of trade. Our bodies, our sperm, our eggs, our wombs, our ideas, our relationships, our friendships, our interests, our hobbies, everything is an object of trade to be financialized, to be commodified, to be traded, to be used. And you see this if you're continually told, and it's slow, remember. It's not that I say to you, you're a commodity. We experience being commodified. When we go to Mass, we hear the word of God. We also experience non-linguistic catechesis. That is, things are being impressed upon us and shaping us. We are constantly being shaped by architecture, by music, and by code, which is not neutral. We're being shaped by it. And so one of the things that's message is, you are a commodity, you are a thing. How can I monetize the next idea? Oh, I have a picture of my family, picture of this. I'm going to monetize, get a Twitter, get likes. Everything becomes commodified. And this has a negative relation on relationships. The use of technology, and again, remember, if I'm not clear about this, artificial intelligence algorithms are creating, there's a thing called it used to be called the Persuasive Design Lab. Now it's called the behavior lab at Stanford. There's literally neuroscientists and psychologists building algorithms to keep you engaged and push you in certain ways. This is a fact. It's not a secret. I know the technologists here are nodding. Okay, so you're dealing with something. There's a Benedictine monk, Augustine Wetta. Some of you maybe read his things. I talked to him. He said, the kids stand no chance. He's also a high school teacher. He goes, they stand no chance. Guess what? Neither do the adults. We don't stand a chance against this. It's just we don't have the capacity to battle it on its own terms. There is an answer, but it's not simply that we can just do it on our own. So look at this. Worldwide increases in adolescent loneliness. Rates of anxiety and depression rising among Americans, especially young. Among older people, we have what's called the deaths of despair. So the relationships are breaking down, and digital technology is part of this problem. Now, what we're seeing is it's getting worse because many teens are turning to AI chatbots for friendship and emotional support. 80%, and this is from Forbes, but 80% of Gen Xers would marry an AI. I was looking up a story. I was going to find the picture. Some of them I couldn't put up here, but there's a picture of this young lady. She's quite beautiful, and she's at Wimbledon. And she's a very important influencer. And she's at Wimbledon, and she's sitting there like this, and she's got an Aperol Spritz, and she's doing these things, and she has all these followers, and people are like, wow, she's gorgeous. There's only one problem. She's not real. She's made up by AI. Okay, that's why she's so beautiful, right? They made her up. And this is, there are like, it's very difficult to begin to determine, wait, who am I in relationship with, right? It's not just the scams that we get. It's now actually love, like falling in love with a machine. And this digital life, it in a sense, just kind of gives you what you want, what you think you want, but it ultimately breaks you down. So I think we have to be attentive to that as well. Underlying much of artificial intelligence development is the problem of transhumanism. There's a lot I could say here, but transhumanism is this idea that if we could combine biology with technology, we can create a new kind of person. We can move up the evolutionary chain, and we are going to become like gods, right? And so you see this aspiration that we're going to upload ourselves to the internet, et cetera. Billions and billions of dollars are spent all over Silicon Valley and in Boston and other places on transhumanist ideas that we are going to somehow become like God. The human being, the new Tower of Babel is not the Third Reich. It's not the big building that you're going to climb up. The new Tower of Babel is man himself. Right? Genesis, let us burn bricks and make a name for ourselves. Instead of being given a name, we're going to make a name for ourselves. The new Tower of Babel is ourselves in this transhumanist model. John Johnson of Patmos Technology said once, and I think something worth thinking about, are we going to combine ourselves with our technology? Are we going to commune with our technology? Or are we going to commune with our Creator? And I think it's a very important thing to think about. Related directly to that is, and this I think is not aspirational, this I think is one of the biggest immediate problems we're going to face. I hope I'm wrong, but we are going to face the combination of large language model, AI processing, and CRISPR, where genetic engineering is moving to designer babies. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Pope Francis has also written about this and the dangers of designer babies. This is, again, the commodification of a person. I'm going to create the kind of person, right? So we're going to choose, I want this child to be this tall, with this muscularity, and these color eyes, and this level of intelligence, and this level of charisma. Many people think I am a designer baby, okay? So I just wanted to see if you were awake. All right. So I'm glad you are. So, okay. So, as Bill Drexel wrote in the New Atlantis magazine, artificial intelligence is to genetics what calculus was to physics. It provides the tools necessary to harness full power of biology that make early efforts appear primitive by comparison. So there's the problem, of course, with off-target effects. I'm like, oh, there's so many complexities. With this computer power, there's going to be a desire to build designer babies. All right? Now, related to this is a deep problem. One, it's the commodification of persons. Two, it's in vitro fertilization. We're going to have probably millions of embryos of human children that are going to be killed and disposed of. By the way, in case you don't know, designer babies is also already real. So He Jiankui, who's a Chinese scientist, I think it was 2016 or 2019, in vitro, that means in the lab, there were two twin embryo girls. He made them HIV resistant. Okay? Those girls are born in China. This theoretically created a moratorium on CRISPR, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So think about this for a second. He genetically engineered in vitro, in a lab, girls who are HIV resistant. Well, I'm sorry to be dark for a minute. Why don't you make them gonorrhea resistant? Why don't we make them sterile? And then we can commodify them to be used as slaves for perversion. This is the reality of designer babies is connected deeply to the commodification of persons, and it's a serious problem, and it's spreading like a virus, even if we don't know it. Now, this has, as I said, social, anthropological, and theological impact. I've already talked about the anthropological impact. I think the anxiety, the sense that you don't matter, that you're nothing. It also creates confusion about God and creation and who we are. I'm a fan of Benedict XVI. He talks about this in an essay on anthropology and culture. This idea also is not new. So in medieval Jewish Kabbalism, right, the Kabbalah tradition, there's this idea, what's called a golem, which sounds like Gollum from the Lord of the Rings on purpose. It's a golem, and the idea was that you could create a man. Through the power of recitation, you could create this golem. And so what happens is, God is no longer needed. And so he explains, he says, so when he finally appears, this man, he will tear away the first letter, aleph, from the word emeth, meaning truth. There will then be on his forehead, instead of the inscription, God is truth, the new motto, God is dead. This new saying is explained with a comparison that ends in brief. And this is right, quote, when you, like God, can make men, people will say, there is no God in the world but this one. So this is going to create a sense, it's a theological problem. It is the new Tower of Babel. And we see this connected. There's already a movement to worship AI as God, okay? This transhumanist worldview is the new Tower of Babel. So, I think this is an interesting quote, and then I'm going to move to the conclusion. This is Joseph Ratzinger in an essay called What is Truth? And I'd like you to replace the word state to artificial intelligence and genetics. It is not the task of the state or artificial intelligence or genetics to create mankind's happiness, nor to create new men. It is not the task of the state to change the world into paradise, nor can it do so. If it behaves as if it were God, this makes it the beast from the abyss, the power of the Antichrist. That's Pope Benedict XVI, Joseph Ratzinger. And I think it's something for us to consider. So, how do we think about this response? So this is, Del Noce and Francis are great on this thing. AI put that in the wrong place. I have no responsibility whatsoever. That slide should have been earlier. It's AI's fault. Okay, how do we think about it? So very briefly, I would say this. Obviously, there's a lot of things we can do. We need good rule of law. Not just regulation, we do need regulation, but we need rule of law to how AI is going to be used, treated, et cetera, and how it's going to impact us. We have bad rule of law in the way AI and social media, digital companies have been able to take all of our data. It's a very serious problem. We need good rule of law around that. Second, I think we need to build digital technology that serves the person and the family and the church. So right now, the dominant views of most people in Silicon Valley are materialist and transhumanist. And it's maybe not 100%, but it's a dominant aspect. If we don't build good technology, how are we going to ask for good technology? So we have to do that, and I think it's very important. I don't necessarily think there's such a thing as Catholic AI, but I do think you can build human-centered technology. And we have some. I think these glasses are magnificent human-centered technology. There's a lot of human-centered technology, and we have to build it. I think we have to build commerce that serves families and communities, new businesses, new innovations, new ways to solve this problem. And I also believe that we need decentralization. There's a centralization problem in politics, and there's a centralization problem in technology. And we need to exercise the principle of subsidiarity by rebuilding local civil associations, local politics, local businesses, local charities. But I believe you cannot have decentralized life on centralized technology. So we need innovation in decentralized technology as well. But ultimately, I think that the answer is not in any of these things. I think those are important, and that's why I brought them up. But I think ultimately, we are in a struggle between what it means to be a human being. We're in a struggle between the technological paradigm and a human-centered paradigm. And there is no technical solution to that problem. There is no technical solution to the problems of evil, sin, suffering, or death. We can use technology, but there's no technical solution. So I would say the fundamental thing we need to do is we need to reaffirm and repropose the gospel of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ became incarnate, that he suffered, died, and he rose again. And that within that gospel is the good news, the evangelium of the human person, that we are not useless, we are not commodities, that being is good, that matter is good, that our bodies are good, that children are good, that relationships are good. We have to affirm the good news about the human person and our reason, our freedom, our spiritual emotions, and our social nature. We have to affirm the fact that we are subjects and not objects to be manipulated. This is the good news about the person. And we must affirm embodiment. The incarnation, the resurrection of the body, this is fundamental to Christianity. This is part of the Jewish and Christian tradition that stands apart from the goodness of being, the goodness of matter. And the incarnation is the good news about the human person. Benedict XVI said, "We are not some casual and meaningless product of evolution. Each of us is the result of a thought of God. Each of us is willed. Each of us is loved. Each of us is necessary." The data is clear across the Western world. We have meaningless anxiety, confusion, and despair. Loneliness is so prevalent that people turn to devices to ease their pain, like we turn to opioids to ease our pain, and all became addicted and hollowed out. So we have to escape the technological paradigm, present the gospel of Jesus Christ. And this, it can be done through some technology, but ultimately it's going to be done in human relationships, relationships with one another, with friendships, with family, and ultimately in the ecclesia, in the divine liturgy and worship, where we commune with our Creator. And it is here that the goodness, uniqueness, and unrepeatability of every single person is affirmed. And it's here that we have this communion, this proper love and communion, where we know that God loves us and that it is good that we are. The message of love and of God is that it is good that we are, that God loves us. And the technical is only an aspect to get us to this point. That if we're going to rebuild the human person and recover our dignity, it has to be done in loving relationships and intersubjective self-donation that affirms the goodness of being of each person. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Michael. Dr. Stephen Barrows is the Chief Operating Officer of Acton Institute. Prior to his role at Acton, Dr. Barrows served as the Provost and Dean of Faculty at Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he also served as a tenured professor of economics. Steve also served 21 years in the U.S. Air Force as an acquisition officer, an economics professor at the U.S. Air Force Academy, and a faculty member at the National Military Academy of Afghanistan. He retired from the Air Force in 2013 at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. His talk today is titled AI's Economic Impact, Displacement, Productivity, and the Future of Labor. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Stephen Barrows.
Thank you, Scott. And as Scott noted, I am an economist by academic background. And as an economist, I'm always looking, of course, for opportunities for market exchange to achieve what we call Pareto improvements. And this morning, speaking with my colleague and friend Michael Matheson Miller, I seized an opportunity and saw that Michael, and I want to make very clear up front, did not exceed his time, but I sold him 11 minutes of my time for a really good price. So, well, it's really an honor to be here at the Pontifical Gregorian University, and I've learned so much, not only in the conversations that were occurring this morning, but just listening to the previous talks. In fact, Carl, thanks so much for your discussion of work and the actual changes to the workplace. What I'm going to do is discuss things in a labor perspective, but more from a macroeconomic standpoint. So, of course, Catholic social teaching has long engaged the topic of labor market disruptions and their impact on individual lives and families. That engagement includes the implications of technological change for workers. Now, Pope Leo XIII's Rerum Novarum, of course, set the stage by articulating essential principles for a harmonious social order and considered the labor question through the lens of the reciprocal obligations of employers and employees. Pope Pius XI then built upon his predecessor's teaching in Quadragesimo Anno and made brief reference to technical and economic progress. But it was perhaps Pope Pius XII's 1957 encyclical called Miranda Prorsus that marks the beginning of an amplified focus on technological disruptions. Pius XII opened that encyclical by stating, quote, "Those very remarkable technical inventions which are the boast of the men of our generation though they spring from human intelligence and industry, are nevertheless gifts from God, our Creator, from whom all good gifts proceed. For he has not only brought forth creatures, but sustains and fosters them once created, end quote. Yet, as we've already heard today, every technical invention brings both costs and benefits, and Pius XII cautioned in that same encyclical that machines also had reduced some men to, quote, a state of slavery and caused grievous harm, end quote. Now, the intersection of technological progress and church teaching continued, of course, with St. John the 23rd in Mater et Magistra, St. Paul VI in Populorum Progressio, and St. John Paul II's Laborum Exercens and Sollicitudo Rei Socialis, among, of course, other documents. And finally, Pope Benedict XVI and Pope Francis devote major sections on technology in two of their encyclicals. Benedict included an entire chapter on the development of peoples and technology in Caritas in Veritate. And Francis devoted significant sections of Laudato Si on the topic. Both popes highlight technology's trade-offs, with the latter warning us, I think as Michael brought up, against succumbing to the so-called technological paradigm. While there are new and potentially unique disruptions from artificial intelligence, Catholic social teaching, I think, can in fact guide us with moral principles for its ethical development, while at the same time offering prudential economic considerations which can prevent a reactionary suppression of technological developments which may otherwise promote human flourishing. So let me now address Pope Leo XIV's manifest interest in the technology of artificial intelligence, and specifically the impact AI will have on labor displacement and productivity. Many economists and social scientists speculate on how AI will affect labor markets, and at times their estimates vary widely. So on one end of the spectrum, in 2013, scholars Carl Benedict Fry and Michael Osborne estimated that the growth of computerization, advanced robotics, and machine learning more broadly entailed that nearly half of US jobs would be at high risk for automation over the course of the next 2 decades. Others, on the other hand, firmly believe the artificial intelligence industry is presently in a bubble, akin to the dot-com bubble of a quarter century ago, and thereby creating a significant job loss risk of an entirely different kind when that bubble inevitably bursts. On a more positive note, Sam Manning and Thomas Aguirre of GovAI find evidence that the vast majority of jobs that are exposed to the advances in artificial intelligence consist of workers whose adaptive capacities are above the average. That, of course, is good news, since technological disruptions to the workforce are inevitable in a growing economy, and the greater workers' adaptive capacities are, the more absorbable are the harms from displacement will be. It is, of course, too early to tell how widespread displacement from this new general purpose technology will be on various labor markets, although displacement and augmentation are already occurring. Stanford University economist Eric Brynjolfsson and colleagues estimated last month that young workers in occupations, that many young workers are most exposed to AI in those occupations that are most closely affiliated with those processes, such as software developers and customer support. And in fact, they estimated, and I'm quoting here, that they have already experienced a 16% relative employment decline in those most exposed occupations, end quote. So various studies tracking AI adoption rates also indicate that adoption is rising rapidly, and a recent study by Penn Wharton estimates that generative AI will increase US productivity and gross domestic product by 1.5% by 2035. So those are just some details. Now, regardless of whether one assumes that AI's transformative effects are similar to major technological disruptions which have preceded it, or is something fundamentally unique, we can still draw the same principles from the corpus of Catholic social teaching to guide our response to these disruptions. From the mechanization of the first industrial revolution, or the mechanization that catalyzed the first industrial revolution, to the combustion engine and electrification of factories that generated the second industrial revolution, whichever revolution it is, some laborers have always been made more productive by technology, while others were put out of work, and still others found new dignified work in those industries that were triggered by the new technology. That always happens. And it's important to point out that technological advances don't have to be complex for them to be highly consequential. Consider the modern shipping container. Had it not been for the persistence and vision of Malcolm McLean in standardizing that shipping container, we might not have seen the rapid expansion of global trade, where the cost of shipping is often inconsequential to businesses deciding on which goods ought to be exchanged globally. Yet the lowly shipping container opened markets globally and was highly disruptive, not only to an industry, but to the entire world. Longshoremen fought to keep their jobs, unions would become violent, and an entire organized crime had to adjust to all sorts of new tactics when they moved away from cargo nets. So today's largest container ships can carry up to 20,000 and sometimes more shipping containers, which of course port cranes can offload directly onto tractor trailers or rail cars to be scurried off to their final destination. And I don't think anybody would want to go back to the days when longshoremen dragged cargo nets and rolled barrels hand by hand from ship to truck. Now, some argue that in contrast to ordinary computers which merely execute pre-programmed tasks, generative artificial intelligence is fundamentally different because it imitates human reasoning and creates new content on its own. Yet even if that is the case, there is still an important distinction to be made between what aspects of human work are easily replaced by AI and which aspects are not. As Arvind Narayan and Shayash Kapoor explain in their intriguing essay, AI as Normal Technology, quote, while GPT-4 reportedly achieves scores in the top 10% of bar exam test takers, this tells us remarkably little about AI's ability to practice law, end quote. Until there is notable evidence to the contrary, I think it's important to begin with what we know, namely that AI is already disrupting labor markets in ways both foreseen and unforeseen. And for now, I think the apocalyptic versions of these disruptions are overhyped. Furthermore, new jobs are already arising, such as prompt engineers, AI ethicists, AI trainers, and the like. Early studies are indicating patterns similar to past technological disruption, displacement, yet also the enhancement of worker productivity and the creation of new tasks, jobs, and work to accompany those disruptions. A recent National Bureau of Economic Research analysis found, quote, a strong positive association between AI adoption and firm performance. A 1 standard deviation increase in AI utilization is associated with about 12% higher productivity, 31% higher sales, 42% higher profits, and 11% higher average pay. That same study also found that, quote, a 1 standard deviation increase in AI adoption leads to a 6.8% increase in firm employment, end quote. So it appears that artificial intelligence is poised to bring the same kinds of economic trade-offs that all technological disruption brings. So given that artificial intelligence will inevitably disrupt labor markets, what principles should guide our response? I think those principles are the same ones that apply to other forms of disruption. It's important to remember that disruption and change are always intrinsic to an economic system rooted in private property, free enterprise, the rule of law, and the common good. Central to such an economic system is the price system, and price changes are inevitably good for some parties and bad for other parties. Tech advancements always change relative prices and reallocate capital and labor in various ways. This, of course, is the result of free, creative minds finding better ways to do things, designing better recipes, and discovering new methods to overcome the phenomenon of material scarcity. And no regulation, law, or taxing power, get the water, get really dry. No regulation, law, or taxing power can fully insulate the labor market from these very natural changes that result from human action. The creation and destruction of jobs arises also from other sorts of changes. Globalizing trade or restricting trade is going to upend that. Enhancing consumer demand or suppressing consumer demand will do the very same sorts of things. And new technologies which make the old ones obsolete will still again disrupt labor markets. So this is the inevitability of change driven by human action, which is why, as Pope Benedict XVI reminded us in Caritas in Veritate, the modern economy must also be animated by a spirit of gift centered on the person. So technological progress enhances economic growth and human flourishing while creating collateral harms. The labor market displacement created by artificial intelligence entails the spread of what Dominican economist and theologian Father Albino Barrera calls a negative pecuniary externality. To address these negative financial spillovers to others caused by AI, it's important that public policy remove unnecessary friction, which hinders the adaptive capacities of individuals who lose their jobs. So unnecessary occupational licensing, deterrence to the free movement of labor, obstacles which lock out others from their right to work, each of these then can create added harms. Naturally, of course, adaptive capacities vary from person to person, and this calls for our particular attention. In certain cases, and perhaps maybe in many cases, technological progress can trigger large clusters of workers to lose their jobs at once, and alternative occupations are often elusive. More importantly, sometimes these negative spillover effects are particularly severe for certain individuals and particular families. In those cases, it is incumbent to use the principles of subsidiarity and solidarity to address and alleviate those harms. And by the way, those changes and those harms aren't necessarily the result of injustice. In fact, labor market churn and turnover is a natural and inevitable result of human action and may not manifest injustice at all. Furthermore, technological advancement in the long run is a vital component to enhancing worker productivity and raising society's standard of living as a whole. It is here that I think the great Catholic social encyclicals I referenced at the beginning of my talk can provide significant insight and guidance. But there is one aspect of AI and the labor question that I think is unique from prior disruptions and requires deeper reflection because it has implications for how businesses, consumers, and families build, implement, and make use of AI. So let me elaborate by first referencing a scene from a film that Pope Leo has identified as one of his favorites. That's the classic American tale, It's a Wonderful Life. Now, for those of you who have not seen that, the film's amiable protagonist, George Bailey, finds himself in big trouble through no fault of his own. In a despairing moment, he expresses to his guardian angel Clarence that he wishes that he had never been born. Now, God grants him his wish and gives George the opportunity to see what life would have been like had he never come into existence. In the film's pivotal moment, when the realization of a world without him becomes clear to George, Clarence gently remarks to him, "Strange, isn't it? Each man's life touches so many other lives. When he isn't around, he leaves an awful hole, doesn't he?" Artificial intelligence is already displacing and augmenting labor and creating new jobs, yet it is also poised to indirectly do something else, I think, something that is perhaps not new, but may be uniquely powerful compared to the technological advances which have preceded it. Let me explain. Brown University economist Oded Galor has persuasively argued that the accelerated technological progress has raised the importance of investing in human capital, and that as investments in human capital become more important, parents tend to have fewer children and invest more in their development instead. In other words, he claims, technological progress has been a major contributor to declining fertility over the past 2 centuries. In that sense, as yet another technological advance, AI's impact on declining fertility is no different from other major advances in technology. What is perhaps unique, however, is this. Insofar as artificial intelligence evolves into some kind or form of artificial humanity, it pretends not merely the displacement of labor, but also the displacement of human relationships. And this is an important factor for the future of labor. The dramatic decline in fertility rates in our modern world has a very simple explanation. On the one hand, it's just the result of declining coupling, okay, and or coupling that is less fertile. That, by the way, can be the result of both choice and circumstance. Okay, it depends. So the social science Alice Evans posits that much of the recent decline in coupling has been triggered by the ubiquitous diffusion of smartphones, which have occupied our lives through the constant distractions of social media, screen time addiction, and other forms of digital engagement which crowd out authentic, embodied human relationships. Our time has been hijacked and social connections have become frayed. Artificial intelligence may amplify this, having an outsized impact on human fertility and thus harming future number of workers. Sub-replacement fertility rates and declining population have significant economic consequences as the global population ages and workforces peak in various nations. It is here, I think, that the Church can offer an important guidance to ensure that artificial intelligence serves humanity rather than enslaves or displace it. As AI entrepreneurs and builders dialogue with the Church about the rapid diffusion of artificial intelligence, we should look to the great social encyclicals I've referenced before. Yet, perhaps, artificial intelligence should point us to something else. Although AI can never be an artificial substitute for humanity as such, because there is no, of course, true replacement for the person as a person, artificial intelligence can disrupt those human relationships. And so, surprisingly, as relevant as the social encyclicals are, we may want to actually reconsider something else. And that is St. Paul VI, Humanae Vitae, which contains the Church's perennial moral teachings on the transmission of human life. The tools of artificial intelligence could substantially reconfigure human relationships, worsening fertility decline, and it could, by the way, have enhancing fertility effects insofar as it helps adjust to infertility problems through medical applications. But it could also, going back to some of the things that Michael alluded to, enhance illicit methods of fertility, which could have all sorts of unintended consequences. So, artificial intelligence then has great potential, I think, to promote the well-being of humanity by helping us to overcome the conditions of material scarcity. And to the extent that AI does this, surely it's a gift from God. At the same time, humanity must not let AI displace humanity as such. Through the slow, creeping danger of disrupting embodied relationships which lead to love, fertility, and the passing on of human life to the next generation. In Antiqua et Nova, the Church emphasizes that the advent of AI calls us to a, quote, renewed appreciation of all that is human, end quote. And of course, the transmission of human life is something that AI will never be able to do. That is something uniquely human. AI may very well enable us to achieve many great things, things that we couldn't have imagined just a few short decades ago, but what it cannot do is enable us to achieve true progress in its fullest sense. And what is that true progress? St. John Paul II answered that question in his final Wednesday audience, closing out his years-long reflections on the theology of the body. In that final address, he explained that progress cannot be merely measured by advances in technology. Instead, he pointed to his predecessor's encyclical on the transmission of human life, explaining that its content has, quote, existential meaning for establishing what true progress consists in, that is, the development of the human person, end quote. So like all technological disruptions which have come before it, AI is going to augment and displace labor and create new jobs. It will also promote economic growth more than likely, but only by keeping church teaching as our North Star can we inoculate ourselves from letting a kind of artificial humanity crowd out human relationships and displace true humanity. That, rather than labor market disruptions, is AI's unique risk. And it at the same time gives us an opportunity and a responsibility to shape AI so that it makes us more productive and enhances human flourishing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Our final talk will be presented by Dr. William Bosel, who serves as a professor at the University of San Francisco, affiliate research faculty member at Boston Children's Hospital, and lecturer at Harvard Medical School. He's also the director and chief scientist with the MindScope Institute for Neuro-AI. Dr. Bosel's research is focused on developing computational signatures of disease risk from EEG dynamics and clinical data. This research uses biomedical informatics and AI methods to map psychological measures to behavioral symptoms for modeling trajectories of psychiatric health and disease risk. He is now exploring the application of these methods to neurophenomenological assessments with the goal of creating a framework for research to study correlations between cognition and conscious experiences. Dr. Bosel's presentation is titled Clinical AI and Beyond, Autonomy, Ethics, and the Role of Consciousness, a dialogue between science, philosophy, and faith on the future of intelligent systems. Please join me in welcoming Dr. William Bosel.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you to the organizers of this conference for inviting me here to discuss this important topic. I know I'm the last speaker in a long afternoon, so I'll try to make this a little bit interesting and lively, and maybe even finish a bit early. This title slide actually is a summary of my whole talk. I'll talk through it, but we could probably just finish here and be done. So first, a quick overview of the evolution of artificial intelligence. It's actually not all that new. The term was introduced about 70 years ago at a summer conference at Dartmouth University, where the term artificial intelligence was first used and was used to describe the effort to simulate human intelligence. Intelligence wasn't carefully defined at the time, so it was sort of a loose goal. AI research came and went in waves, interest grew and fell, until more recently it became more in the public eye because of some innovations that qualitatively changed what was possible. The first big innovation came in 2011 with a invention, I guess, at the University of Toronto, for which a person was awarded a Nobel Prize in physics just a few years ago, which was remarkable in itself. It enabled massive amounts of data to be processed by something called artificial neural networks in a new way that reintroduced this approach to computing and made large language models possible. Then another innovation at Google in 2017 introduced a new algorithm which accelerated that increasingly, leading to the introduction of ChatGPT in 2022, which exploded into the public eye. Interestingly, I just read, and it's not even on this slide, the former director of artificial intelligence research at Meta, or Facebook, Jan LeCun, recently said that the current generation of large language models has about a 5-year lifespan, and it'll hit a wall and basically not be able to be trained further because it will have soaked up all the information of the world. He has left Meta to start a new company to create what he calls embodied intelligence. So this idea that we'll take AI capabilities and put it into robotic bodies so they can learn from the environment as humans do. Well, I was going to talk about some moral hazards in medicine and beyond. I've listed some of them briefly in the kinds of things that we talk about when we're talk about the concerns of AI and society, such things as the loss of human oversight, and we've heard a lot of these already today in some of the previous talks, so I won't dwell on these, but the opacity of the systems, why are they making decisions they do? That's really important in medical applications. Bias and inequity, we've seen that in systems already. If they're trained on data that is biased in one way, they'll make decisions that amplify that bias. There's an erosion of trust, the potential of de-skilling of not only clinicians, but any human skill that is relying upon AI. All these things are, they're important problems, but maybe not the most important problems. There are also dangers from commercial incentives that will drive the development and use of AI systems in ways that may not be so desirable from a human perspective, and we just heard a lot about the economic implications of AI. We hear concerns about the coming leap to superintelligence. It's not really clearly defined, but some quotes by leaders are really a bit eye-opening, and they point to what I'm going to say is the hard problem of AI. All these other problems that I just listed are important, but they're tractable. They're things we can work with. But there is a hard problem, and I'll say it right now, that is, can AI systems become conscious? Or another way of saying that is, if the answer is no, why not? What's different about humans? And this has really important implications for society, as well as our faith and our ability to understand and explain to others why human dignity must be preserved. So listen to these quotes. This is important. We will hit artificial general intelligence, AGI, which often is used as a synonym for human-level intelligence, sooner than most people think. And then there is a long continuation from what we call AGI to what we call superintelligence, which he suggests will occur in 5 to 8 years after that. Elon Musk, I think we're trending toward having something that's smarter than the smartest human. There's a level beyond that which is smarter than all humans combined, which frankly will happen around 2029 or 2030. Again, a sort of 5-year window. And Ray Kurzweil, who's been saying this is coming for the last 20 years or more, artificial intelligence will reach human levels by around 2029. Follow that out further to say 2045, we will have multiplied the intelligence of our civilization a billion-fold. Well, first of all, intelligence isn't clearly defined. If you define intelligence, for example, as how fast you can do arithmetic and compute numbers, computers are already billions of times faster than us. And that hasn't ended the world. I think there's a deeper issue behind this. We heard this term before called transhumanism. I call it a religion for the AI age. Maybe this dates me a little bit. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. If you know Star Trek, the Borg collective was essentially what the transhumanists have in mind. So this comes from the Transhumanist Declaration. It was written, at least in part, and driven by Nick Bostrom, who's a philosopher at Oxford. Artificial intelligence will not only surpass human cognitive abilities, but will fundamentally transform the nature of consciousness and existence. The part I put in red is the religious belief that drives many, as we heard, who are creating the AI systems that we see today. Machine consciousness will emerge as a superior form of intelligence, capable of self-reflection, creativity, and moral reasoning beyond human limits. Again, they've taken intelligence, just cognitive ability, and transformed that into something much more, including moral reasoning. This evolution is viewed as inevitable and desirable, accelerating humanity toward a post-biological future where mind and machine converge. So, as I said, the hard problem. The challenges I listed previously are important but tractable. The hard problem of AI is related to the hard problem of consciousness, and I want to spend the rest of my time talking about consciousness. I think, remarkably, Pope Leo is very insightful with all the problems we have in the world to see AI, and in particular, the threat of AI to human dignity as one of the preeminent challenges in our society today. I'll go on to say later, it's not that AI will replace human dignity, but that people believe it will. And as I read from the Humanist Declaration recently, Transhumanist Declaration, there are many who believe that. So we must never forget the ontological dignity that belongs to the person as such, simply because he or she exists and is willed, created, and loved by God. We all believe this because we have a source of knowledge that's beyond science, church doctrine, the Bible, spiritual resources that transcend science. But the world needs to hear scientific language as well. And so I'm very interested in listening to and understanding the emerging field of consciousness, the science of consciousness. What are they concerned with? So, David Chalmers, a philosopher of mind and consciousness, 30 years ago at a conference, he used the phrase, the hard problem of consciousness, and it stuck. Specifically, the hard problem of consciousness refers to the challenge of explaining why and how we have subjective experiences or qualia. Or why and how do subjective experiences arise from physical processes? This problem contrasts with the easy problems of consciousness, which involve explaining the neural mechanisms behind cognitive functions like perception, memory, and behavior. So the hard problem is essentially, what is different about humans? And David, he is not a Christian. I believe he claims to be agnostic, but he's honest enough to say there is something there that allows us to have these human experiences of this is me, and it's connected with many other things, I believe, moral awareness and so on, but we'll use the single word consciousness to sort of summarize that which is more than just cognitive or intellectual ability. I think it's remarkable that scientists like David can see this and to say that to account for consciousness, you need some extra ingredient in the explanation. He's aware there's something missing in the materialist description of reality, and it's not enough. Thomas Nagel similarly says in a book published in about 2015, so not long ago, 10 years ago, he is an atheist, and yet he says the materialist view of the world is wrong. We should expect theoretical progress in this area, in consciousness research, human consciousness, to require a major conceptual revolution, at least as radical as relativity theory, the introduction of electromagnetic fields into physics. Perhaps the basis for this identity pervades the world. It's remarkable that they're using these words and not even realizing how this supports our view of the world. So what is this extra ingredient, this unknown variable that serves as the explanatory bridge between the material brain and this awareness of myself, of each of you? Let's call it Q. This comes, there's an anecdote. I think I have a minute to share this. When Albert Einstein was about 4 years old, his father gave him a compass. And he was fascinated by this, that the needle could always point to the north, no matter which way you turn this. And it was explained to him there's this geomagnetic field, and that influences the needle. And he thought, this is remarkable. How do we understand this invisible thing that we can't see? And anecdotally, his uncle told him that there are many things we don't understand, but just call it X and keep searching for X. And so if I meet David Chalmers at a conference next year, I'm going to tell him, David, if you don't like spiritual words, just call it Q, and we'll keep searching for Q. So what is this Q? And here's my anecdote. It'll be in the slides if you want to review it later. I got some great insights from a book that's not very well known called A Study of Hebrew Thought by a French Catholic philosopher, Claude Tresmontant, who wrote in the 1960s or so. And so what I'm going to describe is not mine uniquely, but I think it fits the need for this explanatory gap, the Q that's missing, and it also lays out a clear Christian anthropology that I think might be appealing to the secular community as well. So in opposition to Platonic dualism of mind and body, which seems to pervade our culture remarkably, this idea that there's a separable soul that can fly away at some point, this is not a biblical idea, but the Hebrew and biblical tradition introduces an entirely new ontology. In Hebrew, it was called the Ruah. That was later evolved into the pneuma or nous in Greek. We call it the spirit in English. I think nous is a good word because it's from the same root as noema or experience. It kind of fits the phenomenological experience that Chalmers talked about that we're aware of as humans. The spirit or nous is associated with a spiritual intelligence, and we heard some of this discussed today, this awareness that there's something beyond us. It's kind of interesting, in every human civilization that's existed on Earth, there's been an awareness of the divine. Some of the details differ, but that doesn't happen, as far as we know, in any animal community or any other community. It's humans alone who have this awareness of a divine. It's distinct from just rational computation, something that we share with animals. Animals have a brain and a body like we do, and calculate and make decisions in the world, but they lack this awareness of the divine and awareness of themselves, which is also connected to moral agency and moral decision-making. So I want to kind of beat this in because this is the main point of this whole talk. We are a body, or soma. We kind of like Greek words. Maybe they sound more scientific. a mind, psyche, that calculates and thinks, and probably also connected with emotional reactions, and a nous, or spirit. This is the conscious dimension, and I like to think of this as another dimension of being outside of the three-dimensional physical universe. And this is where it sort of connects with what Thomas Nagel was saying. Maybe we need a new, broader conception of reality that goes beyond the physical world. So I've drawn a third orthogonal axis. It's orthogonal to the physical mental universe, and it connects to some sort of consciousness field that pervades everything. This isn't pantheism, but this is us as individuals who have this ability to sense what we would call pervading grace, or the Eastern Orthodox have a term, the uncreated energies of God, which maybe is appropriate. So this nous is Chalmers' missing ingredient. The fundamental property, it's human property, every person has it. So while AI may simulate intelligent behavior, it will never have this third dimension, this property that's something more than physics. And it can't cross over into that dimension which only humans have. Just briefly, this idea of uncreated energies, maybe it appeals to me because it's sort of physics-like. I read about it in, interestingly, a book by a Jesuit, Catholic, George Maloney, who wrote about the theology of the uncreated energies of God. So this idea is that the uncreated energies, which I think is more or less equivalent to sanctifying grace, refers to God's active presence in the world as a direct force through which humans experience divinity. We experience it because we have the property that allows us to. It's sort of like there are some birds who can navigate by sensing the Earth's geomagnetic field. Well, what do they see? Do they see the field lines? Do they hear something? Do they smell the line? We don't know because we don't have that property. Similarly, only humans have this property of sensing the divine. And I suspect this dimension that we have, just as our bodies grow and develop, get stronger, more coordinated, and so on, our minds can develop, sometimes independently of the body. A severely mentally disabled child, its body can grow, but she or he may remain in infancy for the lifespan, so they can grow independently. Similarly, maybe the spirit or the nous grows and develops. I suspect saints, because they exercise their spirit just as we might exercise our body, it becomes more sensitive. It's able to sense this divine field much better than we are. So, could consciousness interact with the uncreated energies in a manner akin to quantum coherence? I'm going to ignore some of that, but this is what I want to talk about with the secular world, because they talk in terms of quantum fields and so on, and find that interesting. One important point, and before I talk about mind interacting with it, what's really interesting, and Tresmontent points this out from biblical sources, that it's very clear that body and mind, soma and psyche, die. And we all know that, people die. But clearly, in the scriptures, spirit never dies. So if we're this unified three-dimensional being, what happens at death? Well, our sensory interaction with this physical universe becomes inoperative for a while, but the conscious, nous, spirit, whatever we want to call it, that awareness doesn't change. It doesn't die. It doesn't go anywhere. It's in another dimension already. So right now, everyone here is in that other dimension. We're not really too sensitive to it. Maybe there's a few of you who are saints out here who are. I'm not so well developed there. This is remarkable. One key challenge, and this is maybe a bit in the secular world, but it's also of interest to AI, how does consciousness, or our nous, this spiritual sense, this other dimension, how does it interact with a cognitive mind? It does in some ways. Spirit influences our thinking, our mind. It's probably partly what's behind the scripture. Be transformed by the renewing of your spiritual mind. We transform our thinking by transforming our spirit first. Chalmers, again, says, in general, any information that's consciously experienced will also be cognitively represented, but not all properties of experience are structural properties. So what is this relationship between those? That's a question for us to help answer, because people in the secular world are asking this. And what's kind of related to this, and I'll get back to AI in a moment, if we can show that we have this interaction, and a machine, no matter how complex, there's never anything more than calculation going on, that's kind of not a proof, but it's evidence for us of the uniqueness of humans, the unique property and ability we have to sense or communicate with God, the divine, that a machine will never have. So why does all this matter? This deep study of consciousness and philosophy of mind? It's because, first of all, human dignity is diminished by false AI claims. That's why I called this transhumanist declaration a religion. And it's a false religion that will deceive many people because they hear this, and this AI system that will merge with humanity, that becomes God. It is our salvation because it will solve our problems, and it gives us eternal life because we'll upload our minds to the cloud and live forever. It's false, but some will believe it. And there are practical implications for law and society, and in particular, a proper understanding of human ontology informs the guide rails that we should implement to control what we do with AI systems and what we don't do, and in particular, turning over moral authority to AI systems. So finally, just some applications. This idea of consciousness and moral decision-making, we don't have time to go into detail, but moral agency, the ability to make truly moral decisions, which, as we know, have to be informed by our knowledge of God and His laws of love for the universe, that requires this conscious nous or spirit to function properly. So I started out by saying the purpose of my talk was to answer the question, will AI systems become conscious? And I believe and think I can argue that's definitively no, because they don't have this additional dimension, the nous or spirit. No matter how complex they become in their computations, as Chalmers even said, we can't get consciousness from complexity. There's something missing. And that spirit will always be missing, no matter how complex the machine becomes. As I said, it's essential to moral agency, and the decisions we make about how much moral agency to give to the machines depends on this ontology. Okay, I'm going to try to wind up. It's getting late, but a few implications for AI governance flow from this ontology of the human person, what makes us unique. And there's a lot of work to be done here, I think, by Christian scientists and philosophers to develop these ideas further. The world needs to hear it. And many people want to hear it. They may not know they want to hear it, but they're looking for answers. And if the only answers they hear are the materialist, transhumanist perspective, that's what they'll believe. Prevailing guidance, a few points here. Prevailing guidance now assumes human controllable instruments, but as the systems become more autonomous, there's a temptation to give control, autonomous control to systems, because their computational ability, I hesitate to use intelligence, but super intelligence, their ability to compute things will far exceed ours. So imagine you train your AI system to control your military defense system, because it can play chess way faster than a human. It can do military operations way faster than humans. But without any moral agency, that system, which is optimized in the United States to prefer US interests, and in China, Chinese interests, and in Russia, Russian interests, and none of those are Catholic interests, probably. Those systems may decide the best way to preserve our interests is to nuke everybody else right away. This is not so far-fetched. Do we really want to turn over moral authority to these systems, no matter how complex? Obviously, the answer is no. And finally, just kind of interesting, I also work in psychiatry, and a really interesting question is, are there disorders that are not just physical, not just mental, but spiritual, that appear as mental disorders or are currently maybe defined as mental disorders? That affects our therapy. Just giving someone a pill for depression, it can help if there's a chemical imbalance, but it's not going to help if this interaction between cognition and spirit is somehow causing the problem. Then our psychiatric care needs to be informed by this broader view of a human ontology. And so here's a challenge for physicians as well, to take this understanding of the whole human person and determine better therapies. And so what does all this mean? Call to action. I personally feel that we are obligated as Christian scientists and philosophers and scholars to engage with the world. And I think we heard this before in the business world, economic world. We need to be engaged at the highest levels to influence the direction of development. I'm particularly interested in these scientific issues, and that's just one part of it. I think it's important that we adopt non-consciousness as a default. That is, machines cannot become conscious, and therefore we must always have humans in the loop, in control. I don't know how we enforce this. You know, we have to run for office, become politicians, because they're the ones who put guardrails around industry. We heard some discussion this morning about industry self-regulating through market forces. Perhaps we need to be involved in that as well. And that's all. Thank you.
So there's a great amount to react to, lots of possible questions. If your legs are a little stiff, the best way to get that stiffness out is to stand up, raise your hand, ask a question. So I'll turn it over for our second panel for the discussion with all of you to my colleague, the Director of Research at Acton Institute, John Pinheiro.
Thank you, Scott. I wanted to start off with one question, but I'm going to stay seated, if that's okay. Leo XIII in Rerum Novarum, one of his questions was, why do we work in the first place? And his answer was that we work to obtain property, to hold it to the benefit of our families. And so I heard a lot on this panel about the individual human person and about moral agency, but I wanted to bring us from the individual human person to the family and just ask, this would be for William and Michael, the greatest challenge posed by artificial intelligence to the foundational natural society of the family, which does not depend on the state for its existence, but is the primary vehicle of moral formation.
That is the school of love where moral agency is first formed. But a little more specific question for Steve would be to look at those technological disruptions that you talked about that AI has on the family, and whether the impact on younger people in terms of work, that is a prediction. I believe that is happening, that is adversely affecting younger people disproportionately, and how would that impact fertility and thus family formation as well? And Michael, you started first. Maybe you could. Yep.
What's the effect of technology on the family specifically?
The greatest challenge posed by artificial intelligence.
I have to think about that. Okay, I have to think about that. That's a good question.
Well, you work at a think tank. That's
yeah,
good.
That's right. There are, well, I mean, like, I think if I were in Congress, I'd ask to revise and extend my remarks. But okay, I'll have to think about this more, because I think there's many of them. I think that the fundamental challenge for family is connected to this concept of the lack of privacy, surveillance, and behavior modification. I think that's the area where the family's going to be hit the hardest, because this breeds, I think, an individualism, and it's very hard to do education. So if you think about this, education takes place at school, but the fundamental place is the family. The fundamental place where culture is passed down is the family. And I think the intrusion of like behavior modification and artificial, like, you know, AI algorithms, which are shaping parents, children, family activity, you know, like looking at the phone too much. And I don't just mean children, I mean myself. I think that, and I think that the technological society, I think there's something underlying this, and that AI is an amplification. So I'm not sure if this is directly like artificial intelligence, but the amplification of the technological society. You know, Del Noce, who you know I like a lot, is very insightful. He says, well, what happens in what he calls the pure bourgeois, where every single thing becomes an object of trade, it really commodifies everybody, including commodifies the family and commodifies the individuals within the family. And he says key to this is really the rejection of what he calls the objective order of values of tradition, family, and the objective order of values. And Del Noce explains that the hippie rejected technology and the objective order of values, but the modern yuppie embraced markets and reject and continue that rejection of objective order values to family, tradition, religion, the dignity of the human person, and everything becomes an object of trade. And so I would say that is probably the family. Artificial intelligence commodifies all of the relationships in the family and intrudes into the family, so that it undermines parents, it undermines love, and really is a challenge. And so I think we have to be able to, we live in a technological world in the digital revolution, but I think we have to, in a sense, create a protection around our deepest human relationships, marriage as well, because I think it impacts fertility, but I'm going to leave that to Steve.
So I guess quickly, just on the development, sorry. So yes, I would say start with what I ended with was John Paul II's remark that true progress consists in the development of the human person. And so from an economic standpoint, I do think that to the extent that young people are crowded out of the marketplace, find themselves in either low wage employment or unemployment, we would need to take that seriously as not only an economic concern, but also the development of a human person. What I would suggest is both worker and employer reflect a little more on the nature of wages, which is to say some occupations have highly skewed wages over time. And so it may be the case that companies are tempted to say, I'm not going to have these entry-level workers because I've found artificial intelligence tools that will completely do what they would do for me otherwise. Well, perhaps a better approach is say, why don't you bring them in at a lower wage in sort of an apprenticeship fashion and get them to that place where they actually then are paid much higher wages 5 years down the road. You know, some occupations do that. Airlines are a good example of that. Very, very low wages up front. After a few years, significant increases. So that's one thing. And then lastly, fertility, certainly to the extent that individuals aren't earning the type of income that they need for family formation, they're going to defer marriage and a decline in coupling marriage deferment is a significant explanatory variable in the rapid decline of fertility across the globe. So.
Can I add one thing? And that is fully automated luxury communism. I'm serious, that the transhumanist vision is fully automated luxury communism, and that we have like universal basic income and artificial intelligence does the work for us, and we don't have to worry about being upskilled, everything's deskilled, we're lazy. And I think this, there's something about, if we think about economy and ecos nomos, meaning household management, family, I think that it kind of this sense of that work, the dignity of work, the dignity of working together, the ability to be in relationship with one another, having more children, the lack of coupling, and then the lack of children, the lack of brothers and sisters, the lack of cousins. There isn't the ability to kind of go up against one another, and so you have this soliptical world, and then this affects both parents and children. So I think that fully automated luxury communism, which is a transhumanist dream, breaks down the dignity of work and then the dignity of working together, which is central to the family.
Simple answer, I think, is that AI threatens to mislead our children, and we'll lose a generation. And that is, they hear the lie everywhere around them that AI systems are becoming conscious, and many will believe, well, there is no God, look at these machines. I think that's the great danger.
Okay, oh yes, thank you. Can you come down with the other microphone or help her, please?
For those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Jennifer Nolan. I'm the Executive Director of the Right to Life League in California and the founding president of Catholic Polytechnic University in Los Angeles. But we are developing a pro-life research institute, and there is so much discussion about humanity and the preservation of humanity and consciousness. What I'm wondering is there something that you could recommend that would be a good use of AI in the pro-life battle against abortion? How could we harness AI for the good in that battle?
So I guess maybe I'll give a shot at it, though I'm an economist. My wife is a family physician and a fertility care practitioner. She focuses on restorative reproductive medicine. And I think one of the things artificial intelligence has is promising is to be helping with diagnostic techniques for determining why it is that people have infertility, recurrent miscarriages, those sorts of things. I think the more we emphasize the importance of the fact that when a woman loses a baby, it is a real loss. I think too often there is lack of diagnostic curiosity. Oh, it just happens. You'll get pregnant again. Well, I think we need to have in the medical community treat it as seriously as, cardiac arrest. A life was just lost. I think if we help the medical community approach unborn life in that way as a culture, and artificial intelligence emphasizing that we need to heal in the body what is not functioning the way we would expect, I think that maybe is a starting point for artificial intelligence and reapproaching how we even look at life in the womb. If we're too dismissive of it, I think that we can just set that aside and have that same dismissive attitude in the broader pro-life movement. So perhaps that's one application.
That's a really interesting question. I'll take a somewhat different approach. Society tolerates abortion because enough people have been convinced that it's not really clear when a developing human becomes really human and therefore should have human rights. They've been deceived, lots of people. And I see this discussion of AI consciousness as an opportunity for us to engage in this discussion that a lot of people are asking now. Will these systems become conscious? And if we can give a clear answer as to why not and why humans are different from the moment of conception, that may persuade people, which ultimately is the solution. We have to persuade people that human dignity starts at conception, and abortion is murder there.
I'm not sure if this is this, but just to add on this, I think part of the challenge, of course, with the pro-life position and large language models is that it's, large language models collect data from all over, and so we don't live in a pro-life culture. Western culture broadly is not pro-life, and we've accepted the things that Professor Bolsel talked about. This is a question I don't know, but I know like there are physicians here who might be able to say if this is correct or not. But I think two things related to Steve's point. Brian, you mentioned earlier that there's an ability for like AI can read disease and like a diagnostic better than most doctors, or not all doctors at this point. Well, is there a way to, one of the questions of the kind of the part of the lie, it has to do with the philosophical question of the human being. There's a distinction between the person and the body. But the more we can actually know about the properties of the embryo and the fetus and the stages of development in utero, I think, plus imaging, I think just ultrasound imaging and improvements of that alone, I think have made people realize, oh, this is actually a baby. I mean, I know it sounds, for those of us who like think about these things a lot of people don't think they're killing a baby. They don't think about it. They don't actually realize that they killed someone until after. And then they're also inundated with, dishonesty about that. And there's existential crisis. There's existential crisis that people are sitting around, that women have frozen embryos and men. And this is weighing heavy on our souls. And they don't know exactly what it is. It's inarticulate anxiety, right? Which often is the case. So I just think like imaging and the knowledge about what actually is happening and taking place in the stages of development has been a positive force for the pro-life movement. And I think, and Brian, you can correct me, that I think that would be another aspect where it is. But again, you're battling science. Are you going to follow the science or are you going to follow the algorithm? And I think there's a battle there.
Thank you very much. I am Marisol Hurtado from the Polytechnic University of Catalonia in Spain. My doctoral research focused on empowering individuals through emerging technologies. In my work, I support patients with chronic conditions become managers of their own health process through timely information, community assistance, and collaboration via social networks.